Most people experiment with AI by building tiny demos or check clones, but never learn how to integrate AI into a real production-style full-stack application. Others feel overwhelmed by the idea of combining front-end, back-end authentication, databases, and AI into one cohesive system. In this course, we're going to fix that. You'll learn how to build a full-stack AI application from scratch using React, TypeScript, Express, and OpenAI. Not just theory, a real AI gym planner with an actual product feel. We'll design a beautiful landing page, implement a full authentication with Neon Auth, guide users through a complete onboarding flow, and then connect everything to an AI system capable of generating fully customizable workout plans based on each user's goals, preferences, and constraints. By the end of this course, you won't just understand the tools, you'll understand how modern AI-powered applications are actually built, structured, and shipped. Before we get into the video, if you could leave a like and subscribe, I would massively appreciate it. And now let's get into it. Okay everyone, so now let's get started. To start things off, I want to create a folder which is going to contain our project. I'm going to call it React Gym AI Planner. Then I want to drag and drop this folder into the code editor of choice, which in my case over here is going to be the VS Code. Next thing that I want to do is I want to open up our terminal and set up React for this project. So to set up React, we're going to be using the create vite command, and we're going to install the latest version of it. So by the time you're watching this video, take a look at this version. This is the one that I'm using, although most likely nothing will change. Now for the project name, I'm going to put dot so that it doesn't create an extra folder inside of here, and it just puts the project on the root. Then I'm going to press enter, and we should see a select framework option. We are working with React, so I'm going to select here React. The variant, I'm going to select TypeScript. So I'll select TypeScript and use v8 beta. So that's just the beta version. I'm going to put no. However, it doesn't really matter. There aren't a lot of big changes coming on to v8. So at least that is going to change anything related to the code. So I'm going to put no. I'm going to ask install with npm and start now. Yes. So it's going to start installing all the packages that we need into our project. And as you can see, the files already exist over here. Now, while that's happening, I want to, as you can see, we're already running our project over here. But what I want to do is I want to install the first dependency that we're going to need in this project. Now, this project is going to involve multiple routes. So I'm going to need to have a way to handle routing in React. If you're familiar with other frameworks, there are some frameworks where routing is there by default, but with normal React and Vite, they allow us to choose what routing system we want. So what we're going to be using is React Router DOM. So I'm going to run here npm install React Router DOM. We're going to install the package and we should be good to go. Now we're going to come into our project here and we're going to start by first deleting the app.css that exists over here. Delete that. Then that means that we need to delete that import from here, together with also deleting literally everything from here because we're going to restart this from scratch. And the next thing that I need is I want to set up a folder that is going to be the setup for the folder structure in this project. We're going to create here a folder called pages, and in the pages is where we're going to create all of our different routes. Now I'm going to have a couple routes in this project. The first page we're going to have is going to be the home page. So I'm going to create here a file. I'm going to call it home.tsx. And inside of here, I'm just going to export a function called home. And we're going to make that be the default function so that we can import it later. And we're just going to return a div that is going to say homepage. We're going to actually duplicate this file and we're going to create the second page in this project. It's going to be the profile page. We'll basically just change this to say profile, and we'll copy this and change this to say profile as well. I'm going to do this 4 more times and I'll be back in a second. Perfect. As you can see, I created here 5 different files, which are going to represent the different pages in our project. Now, I didn't show myself doing that because it's all the same thing that we just did, where we just changed the name of the component and the name over here. And for now, that should be enough. Now, we want to set up a system such that the user can navigate to those routes depending on what their path name is. And to do that, we're going to be using React Router DOM inside of our project here. I'm going to start by wrapping our app component, which is the entry point of our project, with a browser router. It's a component from React Router DOM. that allows you to have routes. Next, I'm going to add here the routes component, which is a component that allows us to define different routes. And we're going to start with the first route, which is going to be the route for the home page. I'm going to add a path here. I'm also going to import this from React Router. I did an auto import. But the path in each route is basically what is the path name that you need to go to in order to reach this route. Now, the home screen is just going to be in the empty URL, the base URL of your project. So we're just going to put an empty slash here. And we could also actually just change this to say index and it would have the same behavior. And we need to determine what component or what UI is going to be displayed when we get to that route. So the first UI is going to be the home UI, right? The home component. It auto imported for us, but when you go to this route, you should see the home page. Then the next one that we're going to do is going to be the onboarding. The onboarding is going to be a page that we're going to have that is going to serve as a stepping stone when the user is creating their account. So the user signs up with either using their email and password, and then they're asked some questions based on what kind of what are the routine of going to the gym. As you saw from the demo project, this is going to be super important for us to be able to generate the correct AI planner. So we're going to create here a route called onboarding. It's going to be on the /onboarding path name, and it's going to render the onboarding component that we're going to import over here. Now we're going to do the exact same thing for the profile. We're going to do the exact same thing for the auth and also for the account. Now, the auth and the account ones are a bit different. You see this little thing over here saying path name. Don't worry about this. This is because these two pages, the auth and the account, we're actually not going to be generating them ourselves. They're going to be handled completely by Neon Auth, which is going to be the authentication provider for this project. So don't worry about it. We're just going to set it up over here, but later on when we get to the point of the video, I'll explain more in depth. So I'm going to auto import everything and we should be good to go. Now, how do we test this? Well, right off the bat, you can see that by opening up my browser at the localhost 5173, we can see here that it shows the home page. Why? Because we are in the base URL. But if I were to go to the /onboarding, I should see the onboarding page. If I go to the account, I should see the account page. But oh yeah, because that one is a bit different. Let me go to the profile one. That's the only one that we can also show. Profile page and so on. So right now we know our routes are working. So let's start with the first route. And you might expect that my first route is going to be the home page. However, the home page is just going to be a landing page. So it's a bunch of UI that has no logic to it. And this video, I want to focus more on logic stuff. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to start with the authentication. So when we go to the auth page, I want to be taken to a screen that shows some inputs for you to write your email and password, be able to create and be able to log into an account. Now, in order to navigate to those pages, we also need a navbar over here at the top. So I'm actually going to start by setting up the navbar, and then we're going to go to the auth page. Now, before we set up the navbar, I want to set up some stuff related to styling in this project because we're going to be using Tailwind CSS for everything. So if you're not familiar with Tailwind, I have a full course on Tailwind. It's a very quick technology for you to get used to, but that's what we're going to need. And to set up Tailwind, we need to do a couple things. The first thing we need to do is come to our vite config, and we need to install over here the Tailwind CSS vite package. As you can see, I'm going to install it, and we're going to come here to our vite config, and I want to set up the Tailwind config for vite. All I have to do is just come here to plugins and then add Tailwind CSS as a plugin and open and close some parentheses. Then I want to come here to our project and I'll go to the index.css. Right now, this is our index.css. It's completely empty, just with the root stuff that comes with the project. Now, for you to enable Tailwind in any project, all you have to do is just import over here at the top the Tailwind CSS library. Now, as you can see right now, it just defaults to an empty screen because we screwed this up, but I just removed this. And now I want to remove the entire rest of this code because this style is what comes with the basic styling from Vite. Then I want to set up the theme for our project. Now, in this project, I will be writing some CSS through Tailwind, but Again, I don't want to focus too much on the styling because I don't think you guys want to see me typing class names for a whole hour, right? If I remove me typing on the class names, but I explain it, it will actually save you guys at least an hour of this video. So what I want to do is I'm just going to copy and paste here the basic styles that we're going to have for this project. This includes a theme. Now, a theme in Tailwind CSS is when you can define some variables that are going to be consistent as colors, fonts, whatever you want for your project. So these are going to be the colors for our project. You see, it'll automatically set it up as the background is going to be this dark black color. The text is going to be white. Sometimes we're going to be using this gray. For some like accent button colors, we're going to use this green. And those are going to be the colors. So if you want to easily change the color for your website, just go ahead and change the colors over here. Then as the base layer over here, we're just setting up some stuff like the background color for every page should be the same. The color for the text on every page should be the same. The font should be the same on everyone. And for the body, we're just setting a bit of structure for the page, like no margin, and the height has to be 100% of the vertical height. Then this one is just a minor one that I will address later on because we're gonna get to it. Perfect. Now we should be good to go. We'll start by setting up the navbar and the structure of each of our routes. So in our app.tsx, I actually want to wrap all of our routes around with a div that is going to represent every single page. So by putting this around the routes definition, it means that this style, this div will always be around no matter which route we're in. So in here, I'm going to add a class name that is going to make this have a minimum height of the screen, a display of flex, and the display the flex direction is going to be column. Now this won't have any effect from now, but you're going to see later on that it definitely does. Then I want to add a main tag that is also going to wrap around all of the routes. I'm going to set the class name here to have a display of or a flex of 1. And above this, I want to render our navbar. Now the navbar is going to be a component that I'm going to create. And because I put it atop of the routes, it's going to appear no matter which route you're in. So we're going to show the navbar on every route and we don't need to call it every single route. Now to get the navbar, I'm going to actually create here a folder called components. Now to get the navbar, I want to create here a folder called components. In this folder, we're going to have a bunch of different components. So I want to subdivide it even more to keep it organized. And I'm going to create a component called the layout, or a folder called layout. Inside of it, I'm going to put the navbar.tsx and we're going to start creating this function. I'm going to export default function navbar. And the navbar will be pretty simple. We're just going to return here a header tag, right? Because it's a header. Actually, I might return a nav. It might make more sense in this case, but no, actually we'll keep it as a header. We'll have a nav later on. And I'm going to import the navbar right now so that we don't get any errors. And now whatever we put here should appear on every single route. Now to get things started, I'm going to add some of the elements. We'll start by adding a div here, and we're going to add a link, which is a component from React Router DOM, which allows us to navigate between pages based on clicking on something. It's basically just a link. You know what a link is, right? But we use this because it is more compatible with React Router DOM instead of a normal A tag. Then I want to render the logo for the website. To keep things simple, we're going to be using Lucid React as the library for icons, and we're going to put an icon as the logo. So I'm going to install here Lucid React. It's a package that allows us to have access to some really cool icons, and I'm going to render here the icon for the dumbbell. This is going to be the logo for our website. Then I'm going to put a span here with the name of the website. It's going to be called Gym AI, but you can again change it to whatever you want. Now on this link, I want to navigate to the home page when you click on it. This is a very common pattern where when you click on the logo, it takes you to the home page. I'm currently in the home page, so nothing will happen, but this should work. Then what I want to do is I want to apply some styles. I'll start with the header, and the styles we want to apply here is just like this. We want to set the navbar to be completely fixed at the top. So as you scroll, which right now we can't do, but as you do it, it's going to be stuck at the top. Because it's a position fixed, we want to set the top to be 0 and the left to be 0, the right to be 0 as well. And we're going to put it on top of everything with a z index of 50. Then we're going to set a border bottom And we're going to make that color be the border color that we defined in our variables. We access color variables by using the var function in Tailwind and accessing the name of it. We'll do the same thing for the background, but we're actually going to make it be 80% opacity so that it has a little glass look to the navbar. To add more to the glass look, we're also going to add a blur to the backdrop. Then for this div over here, we're going to add a class name and we're going to make the size of it, the max width, be 6XL. Then the margin X is going to be auto. The padding X is going to be 6. The height is going to be 16. And I'm going to set the text to have a color. Now the color of this text is going to be the variable for the color of text that we created. So color foreground. Foreground just means that is the color that goes on top of the background. Then for the link over here, I'm going to paste what I want us to do, which is I want to add a display flex, an item center, so we center it, a gap of 2 in between the icon and the name of the website. And we're also going to set the color to foreground. That also means that probably I can just remove this over here. And I want to add some more styles to this. I want to add a display flag, so we center it also like this. We can even justify it even more by saying item center, but it should be good to go already. And I want to justify between. Now, why are we doing justify between? Right now, we only have one thing inside of this div, which is the logo over here. But we're also going to have the links, and justify between makes it such that there puts a space of equal space between the left side and the right side. So the links will go over here. The next thing I want to do is define the color of this logo. I'm going to add here a width of 6, a height of 6, and I want to make the color, because it is actually a text, be the accent color. So I'm going to add here var color accent. So it's going to be that green color. Perfect. Then for this text over here, we're going to add a font semi-bold and a text large. Perfect. Now we're done with adding the logo. We're going to come down here below the link, and I'm going to add a nav, which should have all of the links inside of it. Now the links are kind of going to depend whether or not the user is authenticated or not, because if the user is not authenticated, we should show a sign in and a sign up button. But if the user is authenticated, we should show something like a profile button. Obviously right now we don't have the logic of finding out if the user is authenticated or not, but we can start setting up the non-authenticated version of this navbar. So I'm going to add here a empty fragment, because we're going to actually just add 2 siblings right next to each other, and we need to add an empty fragment for that. We're going to add a link to the auth screen. So we're going to add a link that is going to take you to the sign in screen first, and the path to that is going to be auth/sign in. Like I said, we haven't actually created anything related to auth, but that's all set up automatically by Neon Auth. It will set up for you a sign in and a sign up screen that you don't need to worry about. So we just have to put the correct path over here. Then inside of here, we're going to put a button, and right now we don't have that component, but we're going to add it. And the button is going to say sign in. Now, what button is this? Well, this button is going to be one of the core UI components we're going to have in this project. The different core UI components we're going to have are going to exist in a folder called UI. Now, you can set up buttons from anywhere. You can use, for example, ShadCN for components if you want to. You can use something like Radix UI for components. I'm going to leave this up to you, but if you want to use exactly the same components that I'm going to be using for like reusable stuff, you can just download the files I'm going to insert in the code. So we're going to have a button component that looks a bit like this. So this is a reusable component that we can use in multiple places in our project. As you can see, it has different base styles, different colors, and so on. And we can just call it whenever we want. I can come over here, import this, and just use it. And as you can see, the button appears on the top right. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to set the size of this button to be small, because that's way too big. Then I want to copy this, and I want to make 2 of them, right? The first one is going to be the sign in. The second one is going to be the sign up, and this will change to say sign up. The size will also be small, but actually the top one, to make them different, I'm going to add a variant to it, and I'm going to set it to be the ghost variant, which makes it such that the sign in is less visible than the sign up. Now, temporarily, what I also want to do is I want to come over here and create a user variable, which we're going to set it to false. Now, this user variable will obviously be replaced later on with the information of whether or not the user is authenticated or not. But for now, we're going to keep it as user, and we're going to set it to false by default so that we can actually start building the view in case the user is authenticated. So if the user is authenticated, we want to render here a different set of UI. And if not, we want to render this UI over here. I'm just going to copy and drag it over here. Perfect. Then what I want to do is I'm going to set this to true temporarily, and we'll add the stuff that we want for the case in which it is, which pretty much is, I'm going to copy this over here, this link. We want to have a link to take the user to the profile screen. So I'm going to have here profile, and I'm going to keep it as a variant of ghost. And I'm going to change this to say my plan. Perfect. Now this takes the user to their own profile screen with their plan. And the other button is something that we don't currently have. We're going to get later on when we set up authentication. So I'm going to leave it like this, and I'm going to set this to false. Perfect. Now what happens when I click on this button? It takes me to the sign up and the sign in, but there's nothing to see there. And that's because we haven't set up authentication. Now to set up authentication, we actually have to also set up our database. And for this video, we're going to be using a database and authentication provider that is integrated with each other called Neon. Neon allows us to have a PostgreSQL database that we can interact with and also set up authentication with their newest version of Neon Auth utilizing the PedroTech framework. To check out Neon, just click the link in the description. It should be one of the first links. Now, when you get into the website, you are going to be able to see you're going to sign in, and I recommend you signing in with GitHub, but it's completely free. The next thing you want to do is click on new project. You'll see the project name will appear here. I'm going to call this Gym AI, and you can choose the Postgres version. I'm going to choose 17, but Postgres 18 could come in the future while we're seeing this, but I'm not going to choose that because it's still preview. Then the cloud service provider I'm going to choose is AWS, and you can choose whatever region you're in. I personally am in the US West, so I'm going to choose that. Then we're definitely going to enable Neon Auth. It's going to make it super easy for us to set up authentication that is directly connected to our database. I'm going to click create over here, and as you can see, we have our project dashboard, but we have no tables or anything that we want. So what I want to do is I want to actually connect our project with our Neon database. Now, the easiest way to do that is to go to the Auth over here, and we want to click here to open quick start. Then it shows here a bunch of stuff, but the thing is we already created our project with Vite, and also we already have React Router DOM. So I'm going to choose npm because that's what I'm using, and I'm going to copy this command over here where we're going to install into our project the Neon database / NeonJS package. We're going to come here, we're going to paste that, and we're going to install that package. The second thing we need is to configure our environment variables. So we need to have a auth URL that is directly connected with our Neon database. Good thing for us, this is directly what you need to copy. It already includes the variable that you want. I'm going to close this up, open this up, and I'm going to create here a .env file for us to add our variables. Now you want to make it into a .env file because this is a sensitive URL that you don't want other people to get when you push your code to GitHub. So we're going to keep it like that. Then we want to initialize our client. So it tells us to create a new file called source libauth.ts. So we're going to do that. We're going to come here to our project, and we're going to create a folder called lib, and we're going to create an auth.ts file. Then we're just going to copy this snippet and paste it over here and save it. It already automatically imports the environment variable that we created, and it set up a auth client for us. Then we need to configure our app layout. This requires us to add the Neon Auth UI provider, which is going to be this provider that we wrap around our entire app with. We also import the Neon database UI CSS. But because we are using Tailwind, we're actually going to not import that. We're going to import it in somewhere else. I'll show you. But we're going to come over here and we're going to import the provider just like this. And we're going to come to our routes. And above our browser router, I want to render the Neon Auth UI provider. I'll just copy this, paste it here, and wrap this entire thing around. Now, I need to pass the auth client into this. it will require us to pass here an auth client, but we can just import our auth client by importing the one that we created on the libauth file. Then I'll paste it over here and we should be good to go. Next thing I need to do is again import the styles. So the styles will allow us to have access to like really cool CSS for the UI of our sign in and sign up screens, all managed by Neon Auth without having to worry about it. So I'm going to come to our index.css, and because I'm using Tailwind, I'm going to import the version of that CSS, but for Tailwind. So I'm going to import it like this, and we should be good to go. Finally, we're almost done. If I come over here, I refresh, at least now things should be set up for us to be able to see here a UI displaying a sign-in functionality, but we don't see it yet. The reason for that is because in our auth page over here, literally nothing happens. It just says auth page. Instead, what I want to do is I want to render a component predefined by the Neon.js auth package called auth view. I wrote that completely wrong, but it's auth view. Now, as you can see, automatically I see here an auth view. This is some UI for you to add inputs and buttons for you to sign up and sign in, but obviously it just shows you a random option. It doesn't actually determines if you're in the sign in or in the sign up page. So that's something we do have to handle. Now, the way we handle that is the following. We can pass in here a path name, and the path name is going to be what we determined over here. Remember? So for the sign in, we're going to pass in sign in as the path name. And for sign up, we're going to pass in sign up as the path name. So what that means is as long as we get the path name from the URL, which we can get by utilizing the use params hook from React Router DOM, we can actually get that path name and pass it directly over here. And then depending on what screen we're in, it should show the correct UI. So right now it's showing, I know you can see because it's being blocked by this, but as you can see, we are in the sign in view. But if I click on sign up, it should now go to the sign up view because we are in the sign up page. Now, to make this look a lot better, we need to add some styles to this. So the first styles we're going to add is we're going to create this div over here, right? And we're going to add the following styles. This is going to make the screen have a minimum height and have some paddings at the top and at the bottom on the sides, and also be display flex and center everything on vertically and horizontally. I also want to add another div over here, which is going to wrap around the auth view, and we're going to make it such that the max width is going to be a medium width and the width is going to be full, just for us to have some responsiveness to this screen. So beautiful. We have here two different pages where we are able to sign in and sign up to an account. Now, does it actually work? Like, can we actually sign up for an account? We haven't even created a table yet. Well, that's because we don't need to create our own user authentication table. This is all going to be handled in the auth section at Neon. We're going to obviously create tables for all of the other stuff, but for auth, we don't need to. So we can actually sign up for an account right now. And that's what I want to do. I'm going to come here to the sign up screen. We're going to create an account. I'm going to call this Pedro. I'm going to create an email called pedro@gmail.com. And the password is going to be password123. I'm going to click on create account and boom, we are authenticated. We automatically got redirected to our base URL. Now, there's no way for us to know if the user is authenticated because even in the place that we do want to know, which is the navbar over here, we are currently just mocking it. Now, we want to actually be able to see it, and there is a couple ways of doing it. But I want to centralize the experience where we're going to have a context with a provider that is going to share information about whether or not the user is authenticated or not, and also information about their authenticated state. So I'm going to open this up a bit over here so you guys can have a better view while we do this, because it's going to be a lot of code now. And we want to start by creating a folder here called context. It's going to hold all of the contexts and providers for our projects. We're going to create the auth context, which I believe is the only one we're going to have, but this is going to be probably the most important one. And what I want to do here is I want to set up a couple things. First, I want to set up the auth context. We're going to use the create context function from React, and we're going to set it to null initially. But the type of it is actually going to be a very specific type that we're going to define called auth context type. Now, we need to define what that's going to look like. So I'm going to create an interface over here for this, but the thing is, right now, all we care about is getting the information of whether or not the user is authenticated or not, right? The navbar that we created has this user variable over here, and I want to get that. I want to know. So to do that, I want to set to the interface here a user as a type. Now for the user type over here, I want to define a interface for a user. Now I'm going to create here a folder called types, and I'm going to create a file called index.ts. To keep it simple, I'm going to make all of our types exist in this file. And the user type, for the purposes that we care about, is actually pretty simple. All I care about is if the user has an ID, if they have an email, and when they were created. Because that's what we need to know if a user exists. Because if there isn't a user with those characteristics, then we're going to come here and say user import our type. We could use the neon default type, but we're just going to use this one. And I'm going to say that this could also be null. Now, after this, I want to define here a new component. This is going to be the auth provider. And the auth provider has one purpose, which is to consume to provide the data in the context. It's going to take in one prop, which is the children. So anything below it, which is basically going to be the entire app. And we're going to return the auth context dot provider and render the children because the UI isn't affected by this component. And then here we'll just pass in the value. Now, what kind of value do we need? Well, right off the bat, we need a user. So I want to create here a user type that we are going to receive, and I'm going to call it neon user. I'm going to create a state called neon user. I'm going to auto import this state, and neon user is going to be the data for the user that we're going to get back from neon. And then we're going to convert it into this simple type where it's just these three things. So after we get that back, we're going to pass in as a user. But how do we load in a user from neon? Then what I want to do is I want to create a use effect over here, which is going to run right when the page renders for the first time. And we're going to create a function, which is going to be an async function called the load user. Now, this function is going to try and catch any errors by getting the user information. Now, how do we get the user information of the user logged in using Neon? Well, to do it, we can use our auth client and get back a response. We're going to say auth client import from that file we created and then call the get session function. This get session function is going to allow us to check, is there a result? And if there's a result, is there a result.data.user? If so, then I want to set the Neon user to be equal to the result.data.user. Perfect. Else, I want to just set Neon to be the Neon user to be null because there's no user. Then on the catch here, I want to again reinforce. I don't want to handle the error logic for now. And then at the end here, after this function, I'm going to actually call it because we can't just make an async callback inside of a use effect. We need to make another function and then call it. Perfect. Then I want to pass this over here as the user. But there's an issue, which is this has a lot of stuff on top of it. For now, it should be good to go. But as you can see, it's because we set the type as any. But when we actually start using, I might come back over here and change this up a bit. Now, let's go to our navbar and let's check to see if this is working. I'm going to come here and I'm going to call the use auth hook. Now, what is the use auth hook? It is a hook that we're going to use to be able to consume the data provided from this auth provider. Now, we don't have that yet, but it's really important for us to do because if not, we would have to call the use context hook for everything we want to do in this project. So I'll just create this use auth function, pass in a context, call it from the use context hook and return it. Then I can actually call it in here. But there's an issue, which is we never wrapped our provider around anywhere. So I'm going to go to our app.jsx or app.tsx, sorry. And above our browser router, I'm going to pass in our auth provider so that everything inside of this has access to it. And as you can see, because we got this information back, now the user value here actually reflects whether or not the user is authenticated because we are. How do we know? Well, come here to the auth, you'll see that there is a user registered. It shows exactly when they were registered and it shows their email. So this is where we're going to keep our data. Perfect. Now, what do we want to do? Well, we're able to sign up. Now, the second thing we can do here is we can add the account button on the top. Like I said, there was one more thing we wanted to add, but we didn't before because we just didn't have the capability of it. Now, to add that, what we want to do is we're going to use one of the default Neon Auth components. So below this button over here, we're going to actually below the link as well, we're going to add a user button. A user button in Neon Auth is going to be a button that shows information about the user logged in. So as you can see, I can click on this and I can navigate between the different options. I can sign out, I can go to the settings, which currently doesn't have anything, but it could. And then as you can see, it shows my email and my information. Now, obviously there are some stuff that we want to change. For example, I do want to change the background color of this to be the accent color just to match more of our UI. And also one of the things that I wanted to do is on our app over here, I want to set the theme, the default theme to be dark, just because from now on, all of our stuff is going to be in dark mode in Neon Auth. So all of the components that we render automatically. I believe it was already in it, but just make sure to add that unless you have a light theme. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to take the user automatically to the profile. However, the way we take it to the profile is we first need to take them to the onboarding. But to handle this logic of where should we go? Should we go to the profile? Should we go to the onboarding first? We have to get to one conclusion, which is the home screen, which is where we're navigated right after we sign up, isn't the place to be in if you are authenticated. That's going to be the landing page. So right off the bat in our home screen, I want to add a check. So I'm going to come here to our home component and I want to add a check to the use auth. I'm going to say const user is equal to use auth, and I want to get back that information. Now, in order for us to do this properly, we also need to know if the data is loading, because right off the bat, we're going to have to make this check and there's not going to be a user, right? So we do want to keep a loading state of whether or not the user is fetching their data. So I'm going to create here a state called isLoading. And when we fetch for the user information, right before we fetch, or right after we fetch, right, in the finally clause over here, we're going to set isLoading to false. It's going to default to true, but then it's going to be false in the end. Then in our type here, I'm going to set isLoading to be a Boolean. And we're going to pass this as a value over here. Now, why is this giving us an issue? It's saying that, oh, we actually should have put this over here. Yeah, that was a mistake. But okay, we have that now. So in our home screen, I can get back the isLoading. And what do we want to do with it? Well, if the user is found, so if there is a user authenticated and isLoading is not true, meaning that we've finished loading the information of whether or not the user is authenticated or not, we found out that they are not authenticated or that they are authenticated, we want to navigate the user to the profile screen. The profile is where we're going to see their own plan already generated. So we're going to use the navigate function from React Router. It's actually a component that we can return. It's the same thing as being able to navigate with a link, but instead we're doing it through a component. We need to specify where we want to go. And we want to go to the /profile and we want to replace the current screen with that one. So right off the bat, if I refresh this, you should see that I should be taken to the profile as I am, because I was here and then I am not, right? I am authenticated and the data is not loading. Now, when we get to the profile, we also need to do a similar check, because the profile is going to be where we show the plan of the user who already generated their gym plan, right? They would just want to see the gym plan that they generated before. But if you've never generated one before, it means that you haven't gone through the onboarding. So what we're going to do is we're going to come here, we're going to open up the profile, and we're going to also do the same check over here. That means we need to import this. And the check I want to do is if the user is authenticated, no, if the user is not authenticated and is not loading, then I want to take the user to the auth screen. So I'm going to say auth/sign in. Now, if there is no user and also there's no plan, which we don't know yet what a plan means, but we're going to create that ability. So we're by default, we're going to say if true, then navigate the user to the onboarding screen. So we're going to create a variable here called plan, set it to true for now, like we did with the user, and we're going to put it over here. You see, I'm already taken to the onboarding because obviously it navigated us to the onboarding. But the idea here is we're going to have somewhere where we're going to keep track of the plan that was generated. And if the user doesn't have a plan, then the user should be redirected to the onboarding to create their plan. So technically, this should be false and the check should be for no plan. But regardless of the fact, we are here on the onboarding screen. Now it's time for us to build the onboarding page. So to start things off, I only want to allow the user to be in the onboarding page if the user is signed in. Now we're obviously going to gate by checking to see if the user exists in the following way. I'm gonna call the use auth and I'm gonna get the user here, and then I can just check if no user, then I want to do something. Now what I can do is I can return this component called redirect to sign in. This is a component from Neon database. They allow us to have a bunch of components that we can use throughout our app. So you can actually build the entire logic of your authentication by using just components, not even any functions or anything like that. In fact, if I want to gate it even further, I could wrap this entire thing with this component called signed in, which will ensure that the UI below here is only shown if the user signed in. Now, what do we want to put inside of here? Well, right off the bat, I want to define the styles for the page itself. I'm going to set a minimum height of the screen and a padding at the top, a padding at the bottom, and on the sides. Then I want to add a div that is going to be the container of the screen. It's going to have a max width of XL and a margin X of auto to center everything. Then we want to set the progress indicator. Now, right now, we kind of don't have the logic for this yet because we haven't even created how the onboarding is going to go. So I'm just going to set this for now, but we're actually going to start by building what is going to be the questionnaire. Now, the questionnaire is going to be divided into different steps. Step 1 is going to be the questionnaire. And step 2 is going to be the AI generation. So this should probably be like this. It's just a comment. I don't really care. I'll put here generating, and it's where we're going to show the generation of the plan. So we'll start with the step 1, obviously the questionnaire. And the way we're going to set up this questionnaire is that it's going to have a bunch of inputs that we're going to use. Now, those inputs are going to depend on what kind of questionnaire we're going to have. Now, you can set up the way you want to do depending on what you want to collect from the user. However, I want to start by creating a section in the onboarding, which is going to ask them what are their goals. So are they looking to bulk, lose fat, build strength, whatever they want to do. Now, the way we're going to keep track of that is we're going to create here an array called go options, which is going to stand for the different options we're going to set for the user. Now, the way we're going to structure this questionnaire is for each option, we're going to set a value, which is just a string that we want to deal with internally. So for example, for bulking, I'll just call it bulk, and then a label. So the label is what we're going to show in the UI, something like this, build muscle bulk. Now, we'll do one for all of the options. You can actually add as many options as you want, as long as it fits in the UI. But I decided to put cut for cutting, recomp for body recomposition, strength for strength, and endurance for endurance. Then we want to create the experience, right? So it's the same thing, but for experience. Now, it's the same behavior, so I'm just going to copy and paste here what we're going to have. It's basically asking, are you currently a beginner, an intermediate, or an advanced? Then we want to check to see how many days a week can they gym. Obviously, we're going to put 2. We could put 1 as a minimum, but I'm going to keep it as 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 7 is not recommended. Never, I believe. So I'm not even going to put that. Now, we also need to know how long they can stay in the gym, because then we can more adequately create a gym workout for them. So I put here some options in minutes. 30 to 90 minutes makes sense. Then we're going to have a set of questions for the equipments they can use, right? The routine will change if you can have access to a full gym, just your home, or just dumbbells. I should have added maybe calisthenics or like at home. I mean, home gym makes sense, I guess, but no, really. So you can add more options if you want to. Now, at last, we have your split options. Now, some people like to work full body every workout, I guess. A lot of people do upper lower. Most people do push-pull legs. But we're also going to, just to switch some stuff over here, we're going to let the users choose the option for the AI to decide for them. So we can even play around with this and see what it generates for us. Now, what we want to do is we want to set up the questionnaire. Now, to set up the questionnaire, we actually want to create a couple components that we're going to use that are UI components. If you downloaded my UI folder previously, you should already have all of them. But if not, then here is the different components that we're going to need. We're going to need a card component, which looks a little bit like this. Again, these are components that I just made for this project. But again, if you're using a different library like ShadCN or Radix UI, you can use, even Material UI has components for all of this. But these are just reusable components that we're going to be using for our project. Now I'm going to close this up and let's continue. What we're going to be using for our questionnaire is we're going to be using a huge card. Now, a card allows us to, let me just import this, add this rectangle with some cornered sections. I'm going to add here a variant called bordered, just because I want to have a little border and I know that that's a variant in the card component. And to start things off, I want to add an H1 tag that is going to be the title of this questionnaire. It's going to say, tell us about yourself. Then on the class name here, we're going to set a text to Excel, a font of bold, and a margin bottom of 2. Then we're going to have a P tag that is going to be a subtitle. Help us create the perfect plan for you. We're going to add a text with the muted color, so it's like a slightly grayish color. And we're also going to put a margin bottom to what comes next, because what comes next is the form that we're going to create for the questionnaire. Now, to start things off, I'm going to start with the goals, right? So what goals do you have with your Jimmy? We're going to import the select component that we created, and I'm going to add an ID to this. We do need to add an ID to be able to access this data, a label, which is going to be what's your primary goal. And then what I need to do is I need to pass in the actual options. The options are going to be the goal options. So the object that we created above. And now we have this select that looks exactly like how we want it to. It has the options from the goal options. Now we need to keep track of what the user is typing on this, right? What the user chooses. So to do that, I'm actually going to create a state up here that is going to keep track of the form data that the user is choosing as they fill out their onboarding. Now, this is how the form data is going to look like. Now, the form data is going to be an object which contains values for the goal that they have, their experience, their days per week, their session length, their equipment, and then I also added injuries here, but I know we haven't added the options here. It's just a questionnaire, a text input that we're going to put at the bottom. I specifically added this because I recently injured my wrist and I wanted to actually see for myself how it can still work out without injuring my wrist even more. But preferred split is just the last option that we have over here. So it's a way for us to keep track of all of the data. Now, how do we use that? Well, if we go down here to our select, we're going to add first the value. We're going to access the form data and access the value for the goal options. So goal. And then when there is a change in this input, right, on the select, we want to keep track or update the form data for that specific option to have the value in this element. So what I want to do is I want to create here a function that is going to help us with that. It's going to be called update form. And this function requires a couple arguments. It requires us to pass in what field we want to update and what value do we want to update it to. Now, the way we're going to do this is like this. We're going to call our set form data here, and we're going to update the set form data to become an object where everything remains the same with the exception of the field we want to change, and we set the value of it to whatever we pass in these arguments. So it's just a way for us to easily update the different values or the different fields with whatever values we have. For example, if there's any change on this input, we're going to call the update form. We're going to pass in goal here because we want to update the goal option. And then we want to pass in the event.target.value. And as you can see, it will actually keep track. We are not with an error anymore. Now we can just continue adding this for the other ones. I'm going to add the one for the select because it's going to be super similar. So the select is going to be training experience, as you can see, and have the different options and default to intermediate. Then for the next one, which is days per week and session length, we're going to add the days per week and the session. Now, I want to make both of these be actually right next to each other as like two columns instead of being on top of each other like the first two, because they're numbers, so they should represent two fields right next to each other. I feel like it makes more sense in this case. So I'm gonna put a div around them, and to make them be two columns, I'm just gonna turn this whole thing into a display grid, and I'll set the amount of columns to 2. Out of nowhere you see this, but there's no space in between, so I'll just set a gap of 4. In fact, there's no space in between all of these form elements too, and that's actually because we have to add a space in the y direction so that each of the elements have it. We don't need to turn into a grid or anything like that. We can just set here a class name, say space y of 5, and then we'll add a space of 5, a gap of 5 in between each of the elements. Perfect. Now we're almost done. The next thing we need to do is add the selects for the equipment access and the preferred split. And after that, we're now ready to add just the injuries. For the injuries, we're gonna add a text area, which is again a component that I created there. Now for this one, we want to add a ID, a label, and a placeholder. The ID is going to be for injuries, right? This is where we're keeping track of injuries. The label is going to say, do you have any injuries or limitations? And also, this is fully optional. I know most people don't have injuries. And a placeholder is going to be something like lower back issues, shoulder impingement, and stuff like that. Then, because this is a text area, we don't want to allow the user to infinitely type on this. So I'm actually going to set here a max amount of rows to be 3. And then we're going to set the value to be form data.injuries and the on change to be the same thing we did before, but for injuries, as you can see. Perfect. Now we're almost done with this. What we want to do next is we want to handle what happens when the user submits the form. So I'm going to create a function, and on the form here, where's the form? I'm just going to call it. When there's a submit on this form, I want to handle questionnaire. And I'm going to add here that function real quick. I'll make an async function called handle questionnaire. For now, it'll just be like this so that there's no error. But we do need to actually add a submit button as well. So below the text area, I'm going to add a div with a class name of flex, a gap of 3, and a padding top of 2. Inside of here, we're going to add a button. This button, we're going to import from our own class. And I want to make it be of type submit, and also add a flex of 1 and a gap of 2 because there's going to be elements inside of it, more than 1 in fact. Now, in case the user isn't submitting, because there's going to be a loading state for when the user is generating their plan, right? Now, in case it's not, I'm going to add here a text saying generate my plan. And right next to it, I'm going to add an arrow right icon from Lucid to show that when you click on it, it will take you to generation. I'm going to put a class name of W4 and a height of 4. Perfect. Because this is of type submit, when we submit this, it is going to call this function. So in here, we want to get the React form event, and it says deprecated. Oh yeah, it should be a submit event. Sorry about that. And then inside of here, we're going to prevent default right off the bat. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to save the user's profile. Now, where are we going to save this profile to? Well, we're going to save this profile to our database. So we need to have a way to save this into our database. And at the same time, after we save it to our database, we want to start generating the user's plan based on this. Now, to save this into our database, we're going to have a table in our database for the profile. And the way we're going to do this is actually to leave this for a second, go back into our code and start setting up where we're going to create this interaction between our client and our database. So because we are working with client-side rendered React, we need to create a server that is going to consume our database and interact with it. The easiest way to do this is to utilize a NodeJS as the language for our server and utilize a popular framework like Express. So I'm going to create a folder in our project called server, and this is where we're going to create our server. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to set up the folders inside of our server. So the first folder we're going to create is the source folder, which is going to contain most of our files. Now, in the source folder, we're going to have one main file, which is going to be the index.ts file. We're also going to have a couple other folders in here, which I'll just create right off the bat. For example, we're going to have multiple endpoint routes. So I'm going to create the route routes folder, and we're also going to have a lib folder for any kind of system settings or any kind of configuration we have to implement. Now, let's start with the index.ts. In the index.ts, we want to set up Express and cores and all of our routes and start the server that is going to run our backend. Now, this is a TypeScript file, and the way we set this up doesn't actually include TypeScript, but we did install TypeScript. As you can see, we installed TSX, which is going to help us set up TypeScript in our project. But one thing we didn't do is create our TypeScript config file, also known as the tsconfig. Now that's all done automatically in our client, but in our server, we have to create our own tsconfig file. And these are the configurations that we're going to have for this project. You can just copy and paste it as you want. It's just following the standards of what I want. And I set strict to false because honestly, even in my real world, if I'm building a real project, I don't care that much about certain types not being implemented, so I always set strict to false. Then what we want to do is set up our script. Now the script you want to set up is going to be the script that is going to run the app. So it's going to be the dev script. So we're going to create here a server script called dev server. And to run it, we need to use the TSX package called the watch function, and then put the path to the file that is going to be the entry point of our server. It's going to be the index.ts file inside of the, not server, we don't need to go into server, but we need to go into the source/index.ts. Now, in our index.ts here, we're going to start setting up the infrastructure. I'm going to start by saying import express from the express package. Then we're going to import cores from cores, and we're going to import the cookie parser package from cookie-parser. Finally, I'm going to import .env from .env, and we're going to start by configuring our environment variables and creating our app. To create our app, we're going to call the express function, and we're also going to define here a port for which we want to run our app in. I'm going to say process.env.port, and in our project over here, I'm going to actually create another .env file that is going to have that port, which in our case is going to be 3001. Then I'm also going to default this to 3001 in case you don't pass it. And below here, we want to start by utilizing course. So I'm going to apply the course middleware. And if you're not familiar with what that does is if you don't do that, then your React client won't be able to correctly make network requests to your own backend. We're basically whitelisting our backend to be utilized in our client. Then I'm going to come here and say app.use, and I'm going to apply the cookie parser middleware. And the final middleware is going to be the express.json middleware that is going to allow us to read JSON for every single request, at least through the body of the request. Now, if you're not too familiar with the basics of Express and Node.js, I have a full course on this, which I highly recommend because I do go into in depth about everything. But since this is a full stack course, I'm going to focus more on teaching the fundamentals of how to connect this backend with the front end. Then the next thing we want to do is tell our app to listen to our server to run on the port that we defined. And when it runs, we want to confirm that it's running by console.logging a message saying server running on port, and then insert the port over here. Perfect. Now we want to run this server. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say npm run dev, and we need to say dev server. And if everything is working, you should see that we have here one environment variable from our path, which is the port, and the server is running on port 3001. So it seems to be working. Now, the next thing I want to do is set up the routes. Now, routes are basically going to be like routes in the client, but the purpose here is that we're going to have different routes representing different parts of our server or our API that we want to interact with our database. So for example, there's going to be a route where we're going to put in all of the endpoints related to saving the user's profile and their onboarding data. There's going to be a route for generating their plan and keeping track of that plan. So we're going to create a profile.ts and a plan.ts. Now, in both of them, we're going to have similar behavior, which is first, we want to import over here at the top, and we want to import the router from Express. We also want to import the type request and the type response. Those are two types we're going to be using to generate our endpoints. Then I want to export a constant called profile router, which is going to be equal to the router function we just imported. Now, I'll do the exact same thing. Oh, actually, I put this in the wrong one. I should have put it over here. But here, it should be called plan router. It's going to be the exact same thing. Then in our index.ts, we want to import it and use it by applying it as an API route. So I'm going to say API routes, and I'm going to say here app.use, and I'm going to apply our API route. Now I need to put a path name to where our API route is going to exist. And I'm going to preface all of them with this /API. And then for profile, it's going to be /API/profile. And we're going to just insert the profile router. We're going to do the exact same thing with the plan /API/plan. And we're going to insert the plan router. Now our routes should be configured, but they're not really doing anything right now. We want to start with the profile one because that's the one that we want to actually save this data from. Now, the first thing we need to understand is that a router allows us to create different types of requests, right? A get, a post, a put or delete request, and interact with our database based on it. Now, right now we want to be able to save or update the user profile. So save the information that they sent on their onboarding. So what this means is we want to create here a profile router post request. That is going to be a post request on the base of the route, and it's going to have an async function that returns some logic. Now in that function, we're going to get some stuff from the request. More likely we're going to get, for example, through the body, we're going to get all of the data from this form, and we're going to have a response that we're going to use to return back the result of this endpoint. Now inside of here, I want to try and catch. So I'm going to say try, catch, get any errors. And in case there are any errors, I want to console.error the exact error and return back a more default message from the as a 500 status through the endpoint. Why? Because we don't want to give very detailed error messages that are easily seen by people using our website through the network tab. So we're going to give a more default one, but we're going to save the actual error message in our own logs. Then in this try over here, what we want to do is we want to first get the information that is going to be sent through the front end. Now the information is going to be sent through the body. We can access it by saying rec.body. This is going to be a JSON, which is just an object that we're going to get. And we're going to think about what do we want to get back from the front end. Right now, we haven't made the endpoint yet, so we can actually just define what we want to get back right now. Now, first of all, two things I need. I need the profile data. So this onboarding data over here that we're going to save in the user's profile. And we also need their user ID, because we need to know which user we're adding this onboarding data for. So I'm going to assume that when we make this request, I'm going to get a user ID back. And I'm also going to assume that we're going to get a profile data back. And we're going to send it with this name as well. Now, below this, we're going to check if there is no user ID, automatically we don't want to continue on with this request. We're going to return a status 400, which means unauthenticated, and we're going to say that the user ID is required. We can save any data in our table with no user ID. Then the next thing we want to do is define how is this profile data going to look like? Well, it's going to look like exactly what we have in our client when we send the form. So if I open up here our source and I go into our pages and the onboarding, it's going to look like this. So the way we define is exactly how we named it over here. I'm going to go here to profile and I'm going to destructure that exact specification as an object from the profile data. Then I want to guarantee that when we get this back, each of the fields are required with the exception of one of them, the injuries, right? We made that optional. So we're going to do some really quick validation here and simple by just checking that if there isn't anything being passed through the body of the request with the goal, the experience, the days per week, the session, equipment, preferred split, if any of them are empty because this is an OR, right? Then we're going to return back saying that it's missing required fields. Finally, we are ready to add the data into our table. But how do we add a data into our table if we don't have that table yet? Well, now it's time for us to generate our tables using Prisma. Now, how do we set up our Prisma ORM? Well, I'm gonna open up another chat over here and go again inside of the server, and I'm gonna run npx prisma init. I wanna make sure that I'm in the latest version. So make sure that you have it. If you don't have Prisma, it will ask you to install first, but I'm already in the latest version, so everything is fine. Now, what did this do? Well, if I open this up, you see that it created a couple things. It created a prisma.config.ts because we are using a TypeScript project. It added a variable into our .env, as you can see over here, with a bunch of stuff, but we're gonna have to change this. And it also created this Prisma folder with a schema.prisma file. Those are all super important. To start things off, what is the environment variable we're gonna put over here? Well, this is the database URL of where our database is being hosted. So let's think about it. Where is our database being hosted? Well, it is being hosted in Neon. So we need to go to our dashboard over here, and I'm going to click on connect, and you're going to see right off the bat that there is a huge connection string over here that I'm just going to copy and paste it into our database URL. So I'm going to paste this over here. I'm going to replace this localhost stuff that we have here, and this is the link to our table. Now, don't use the same one as mine. I'm going to delete this table right after this video. So use the one that you created. After this, we're going to have to actually set up the tables by using the schema.prisma. Now, you could come here and create the tables manually by clicking the plus button over here and creating everything manually. But with Prisma, using it as an ORM, it's actually better for us to create it using Prisma language, because then it will have type safety based on what we create. Now, one thing you might notice already is that maybe when you're looking at this, you're not seeing syntax highlighting on this file. Maybe everything looks white. That's because I have here the package for Prisma. I guess it's called Prisma. So I guess it's called Prisma. Yeah. Install this package or this extension, and you should get the syntax highlighting. Now, how do we create here the correct schema and models for our tables? So to create a table, we create here a model. Then you give it a name. I'm going to call this user profiles. Now we have to define what goes inside of user profiles. Right off the bat, a user profile has a unique identifier. Now, the unique identifier is going to be the user ID for which this profile is for. That is going to be of type string. It's going to have an ID tag, which you should only put two IDs of each table. And we can actually set it to have a type of db.uuid. Then down here, we're going to add the first field, which is the goal. The goal is going to have of type string, and the type is going to be db.varchar, which is a variable character, which basically means that it accepts numbers and text. We're going to put a max length of 20 because we know for a fact that the options don't have more than that. Now, the second one is going to be exactly the same, but it's going to be for experience. So I'm going to add here experience, and then we're going to have the days per week. Days per week is going to be an integer. We're going to have the session length, which is also going to be an integer. We're going to have the equipment, which is going to be a varchar, just like we have there. Now, this might be a bit annoying to just play around with because I'm actually copy and pasting, but you get the idea. And then we're going to have injuries. Now, injuries is optional. To make a field be optional, you just add this question mark after the type. Finally, we want to add the preferred split, which is also going to be a db varchar of the max length 20. Now, for every table, it's nice to have a created at and an updated at. For this one, we're just going to keep it with an updated at field, which is going to be of type date time and is going to default to now. By making it default to now, whenever you add or change anything on this table, it's going to default to the moment automatically. It has a type of timestamps, and we can put a 6 as the max amount. Now we're done with this table and we can get going. Now, what do we do next? Now, to actually push these changes to our table and make it be migrated to the database that we have online, we're going to be using the Prisma CLI to do it. So I'm going to do npx Prisma migrate, and this is a dev migration because we're doing this while we're deving, like we're in the development environment, and then we give it a name. The name I'm going to give is init, meaning it's the first migration. So let's do that. Let's see if it works. It's going to load all of our environment variables. It's going to load our URL for the table, and apparently it seems to have worked. But the only way to check is coming here and refreshing this, and as you can see, 2 tables were created. One was the Prisma migrations. This is just a table that Prisma automatically fills in, and it keeps all of the migrations that you make, and the user profiles. Now, the user profiles is empty, but before we move forward, there's one more thing we need to do. What we need to do is we need to generate the types. So when I use the ORM, I actually want to directly have access to the table names and the types of the fields in TypeScript. Now to do this, we're going to be accessing and creating those types automatically using Prisma and storing them on a folder called generated Prisma. It's going to create a folder inside of here called generated and then Prisma. Now to generate those types, I just need to do npx prisma generate, and you'll see that that folder should be created. Now inside of here, there's going to be a bunch of stuff, but most importantly, it's going to have a Prisma client that we can use with all of our tables. As you can see, it already generated the types for user profiles. So now we have the types and we have the table. What do? Well, we can directly access our table and interact with it using Prisma. So in our profile router over here, I want to, after checking everything, I want to insert a new profile. So I'm going to say Prisma, which I can get by accessing the Prisma client. Now, just a second, we don't have a Prisma client yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go to our lib folder and I'm going to create a prisma.ts file. In here, we're going to export a constant called Prisma, set it equal to a new Prisma client. And the Prisma client is the one we're going to import from our generated types. Now, previously, this would be enough, but with the latest versions of Prisma, you need to actually set up an adapter. So I'm going to import here at the top Prisma PG from the Prisma adapter PG. Then I'm going to create a constant called the connection string, and I'm going to get our database URL from the .env. This also means that I need to config .env in this file. So I'm going to import here .env/config. Then we're going to create the adapter. This is just an annoying thing that we have to do now, but it's part of the process and you're going to do it only once. We're going to set up the Prisma PG and pass in the connection string. And then inside of here, I can pass in the adapter just like that. Now it works. Close this up. Come back here and our Prisma client should be initialized. I'm going to import the one from our lib folder and I'm going to say Prisma dot, and I have access to our user profiles table. Now in here, we're not just creating a profile. We also want to then use it to possibly update the preferences of the users. So I'm going to utilize this thing called upsert, which basically says that if there's no data, insert. If there is already a data like this, then just update. Now, because we're upserting, we also have to specify where would exist this data. So it would be where the user ID, which is the unique field, is equal to the user ID being passed. Now, if we want to update, we're going to have to pass in all of the information for each field. So for example, we're going to pass in the fields here for the values that we got up here for the goal, the experience, the days per week, but we have to specify how it looks on our schema. So it looks like this, even though the variable looks a bit different. The equipment, then the injuries, but the injuries could possibly be null. So we're going to default it to no in case that happens. And then we want to pass in the preferred split and the updated at. Those are going to be like this. The preferred split is going to be normal, but the updated at, we're just going to default it to the current date. Then I want to also add what happens when we want to create. So I'm going to add a create over here, and it's going to be pretty much the same thing. But with the update case, we already have a user ID. For the create, we need to add that user ID as part of it as well. And we don't need to pass in the updated at because this isn't an update. This is a creation. So that's what we're doing. Now, in case this works, we're going to not land in the catch over here. And we know it's successful. So I'm going to say res.json. That's what we return back. And I'm going to return an object saying success is equal to true. Now we have this endpoint and we should be able to create our profile. Let's test this out. I'm going to kill our server here and I'm going to run it again. Now, coming back here, we're going to go into our front end, which is where we left things off. So I'm going to close our server. I'm going to go here to our onboarding. And in here, we have the handle questionnaire function. Now in the handle questionnaire, I want to call a function that we're going to get from the use auth called save profile. Now we need to create this function here. I'm going to add it up here at the top, save profile, and the type of it is going to require us to pass in the types over here. I'm going to create a new type. Now the new type we're going to create is called user profile. And this is how it's going to look. It's going to be exactly how we want to store that data in the backend, right? With the user ID and all that. But we're also going to pass in the options. So a goal can only be a cut, a bulk, a recomp, a strength, and an endurance, just like how we defined it over here. Then we're going to create that type. We're going to come back to our auth context, and I'm going to set this function to have the following type. It's going to accept a profile, which is going to be an omission because you can omit certain types of a user profile, and you can omit the user ID or the updated at, because we want to reuse this function more than just for the creation. Then we're going to say promise, and it's going to return a promise void. Then we can come down here and create this function. I'm going to create here an async function called save profile. Then the type I'm putting here is exactly the type we have up there. But the thing is, in this save profile, we're going to do a check saying that if no user exists, then we want to throw an error saying user must be authenticated to save the profile. Now user here, it should be neon user. Now we're going to create our own API, and that's going to exist in our lib over here. Now I don't want you to confuse the API as the backend. This is just the API layer that we're going to be using in our client. Now in this API file, we're going to create here an object called API, and we're going to export it, and it's going to have a variety of different functions. So in here, I'm going to say API, and we're going to import it. Now, what do we want to import from the API? By the way, let me just put this over here so that it stops giving us an error, and I'll save this for now. Now, in this API layer over here, we're going to have a bunch of API functions that should configure and call our backend. For example, save profile. Now, to save a profile, we need to know the user ID, which is a string, and we need to know the profile, which we can import it from this over here. This is what we're going to be passing. So I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to paste it over here. I'm going to import this. We should be good to go. And then we're going to put here that this is going to return, and we can define the save profile function directly here. Now, to simplify everything, I'm actually going to create two helper functions here. One is going to be a post, and the other one is going to be a get. Now, by the names, you might know that they have the purposes of making a post request and the purpose of making a get request. Now, they are going to be reusable, so we need to have some arguments. For example, what is the path to the post request we want to make, and what is the body that we are sending? Now, the body is just going to be an object because it's going to depend on what request we're making. And to make this request, I'm going to make a res over here, and I'm going to use the fetch API. Now, I'm going to put a very specific URL over here. Now, what is that URL? Well, we want to create a environment variable in our environment variables called vit API URL. So I'm going to come here to our .env, not the one from the server, the one from the client. And I'm going to add above here a vit API URL, and we're going to add the http://localhost 3001. Why 3001? Because that's where our server is running. Then in here, I'm going to import this environment variable, and I'm going to create an API base URL. It's going to call it, actually, I'm going to change this to say base URL because we're using the word API too much. Then we want to add this base URL as the start of every request. But what changes is the path. For example, this could be /API/profile, right? Or it could be /API/plan. In fact, it might be better to already add the API here and then just add here the rest. So I'm going to add the path here. And when we call this, for example, if I call the post function over here, I'll just pass the /profile as the post request that I'm making. And then it should insert correctly over here. Now, the next thing I need to do is give more specifications about what this fetch request does. For example, we need to set the method to be post and the headers to be application/JSON so that it accepts JSON. Finally, we need to pass in the body to the request. Now we get the body from here, but we can't just do this because this body needs to be stringified before anything happens. So I'm going to say JSON.stringify, and we're going to send this as a string in the body of the request. After this is done, we want to check to see if there's any errors. So if the response was not okay, we're just going to send this new error saying request failed. Now, if the request was fine, we're going to return the response.json. Perfect. Now, below here, we have our save profile and we are calling for the post, but it's an error because we never passed a body. What body to this request are we passing? Well, we're passing an object with the user ID and the profile. And just like this, we can now call the API.saveProfile. And as long as we pass the neonuser.id here and the profile data, we should be good to go. Now in our onboarding here, we can call that save profile function by coming here, saying save profile, passing the profile, and I don't know what it imported. We should get the actual profile. I'll just say form data. I guess. Form data, is it exactly the format that we want? I think it is. It's giving us an error because we need to convert this type just to have matching types. So I'm going to say profile here. And I'm going to say that this type is of omit user profile. I can just copy it directly from here. It's the same type we defined over here. And to transform this, I'm basically going to go field by field and map it to the type we defined on the user profile. So this is kind of boring. You can just copy and paste the one that we put over here. We're just converting everything into the specific type that we defined on the user profile type over here. And finally, I can just pass this profile directly. Now, let's see if this works. There's no user profile in our table. And in fact, over here, we can't do anything, right? But what if I want to bulk? I am intermediate, let's say 3 times per week, 45 minutes, home gym, upper and lower split. Sure, actually let AI decide, and I'm not going to put anything there. I'm going to open up our inspect element just to make sure that there's no issues, and open the network tab, click generate plan, and as you can see, a 200, meaning that we successfully made the API request. Now, the only way to make sure is coming to our table, refreshing our data, and seeing if it's here, but it's not, meaning that there is something wrong. Now, our API returned a success, but our data wasn't saved. So let's open this up, see what happened. There aren't any logs that could indicate what could have happened. So this could be a bit of an annoying thing to figure out. But I'm going to figure out and I'll be back in a second to see what happened. So guys, turns out that I actually had another server running on the same port that I forgot to kill. And so it was actually reaching that server. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to refresh this. And I'm going to, again, choose something different, 5 days a week, 45. I'm going to let AI decide, generate my plan, and hopefully it should be here now. And it is. As you can see, on your side, probably worked right off the bat. On my side, obviously, I had that issue, but good thing to know, everything is working. Now, what is the next thing that we want to do? Well, next, when we generate our plan, or in this case, when we save our profile, we also want to generate the plan. After we finish generating the plan, we want to navigate to the profile screen where we show the full detail. Now, in order to do that, we want to first create a state of at which step are we? Are we currently showing the onboarding or are we generating? So I'm going to create here an is generating state. It's probably going to look exactly like this one, but a bit different. Is generating, because the generation is going to take a little bit of time. So is generating, but this one is going to start in as false. Then when we start the generation, so when we save the profile, we're going to set this to be true. And what I want to do is, after the data is done, so in the finally clause, we're going to actually set a try catch here. So try catch, actually, maybe, no, I'll just do it directly here. Try and catch. Now we're going to obviously handle what happens in the catch. It's going to be an error, but we're also going to handle what happens in the finally clause. And in the finally clause, we're going to set is generating to false. Then in our catch over here, we're just going to create a state that is going to keep track of error messages. So I'm going to create here a state called error. It's going to be a string. And basically, if we catch any errors, we want to set an error message, either the message from the error, which we can get by checking if it's an instance of the default error type that we throw over here, for example. And if not, we just default to saying failed to save profile. Now we want to use that to our advantage. So in our onboarding, which, oh, I just realized we did all of this in the auth context. So my bad with that. Actually, I want to copy this two states. I want to come to the onboarding and I want to create them here. So I apologize for that. We're going to save that, delete them from here. We're actually going to copy this logic and we're going to do a Command Z here because this isn't what we wanted to do before the set is generating. This is fine. We're going to come back here and we're going to do similar thing, but instead over here. Obviously, it's a bit different. We have to change this and this should become profile. Perfect. But the rest should become the same. Now, when the user is generating, I actually want to do a completely different behavior. So I'm going to do a check here, an if else, a big one, and is going to check if not is generating, then show this. But if the user is generating, then we want to show the generating step. Now, what is this generating step? Well, it's going to be a card that is going to, not a div, a card, which is going to include a, oh, I guess this needs to be removed from here, but that's fine. It's going to be a card that is going to include a loader, specifically loader 2. This is an icon from Lucid React. And by the way, I'm just going to set this to true initially, just so we can test this. And I'm going to pull this off a bit like this, so we can test while we write. And below this, we're going to add a H1 tag that says creating your plan. Now, below this again, we're going to add a P tag that says our AI is personalized, is building your personalized training program. Now, obviously, we have to add a bunch of styles to this because it will look kind of ugly like this. For example, the variant, we're going to make it be bordered like the other one, so it seems like it's the same card. Then the class name is going to be text center, so everything is centered, and the padding in the y direction is going to be 16, so it's a lot. Now, the loader is the most important here because we want to make it look like it's animating, right? Not just this static thing. And you can do that easily with Tailwind, just like this. You set obviously the style, the width, the height, the color, but then you just use the animate spin and it spins the element. That's a default animation from Tailwind. Then for the H1, we're gonna add a text to Excel, a font bold. And for the P tag, we're just gonna make the color be muted, just like this. So while it's creating, it should show this. Now, it should also actually generate the information, generate the plan. So that's going to be the next big step in our project. I'm going to set this back to false because it should only set to true when we are generating. But the next thing we want to do is we want to create or work on the plan API route in our API. Okay, so in order for us to set up the plan generation, we need to first create the request that we're going to use to generate a plan. So we're going to create a plan router post request, similar to what we did here with the profile router. I'll even copy and paste it here, but then just switch this to say plan router. And what we want to have is a post request, but we're not going to make it a post request to the most basic because we're going to have more than one post request in this router. I'm going to make an endpoint called generate. Now, inside of this generate, we're going to have a try and catch. Now, in this catch, we're going to get any errors that might happen. And like we've done previously, we're going to console error it or return a 500 error message. Now, in the try case over here, we want to first get whatever we're going to get from the request. Now, what do we want to get from the request? Well, when I generate a plan, I want to know who are we generating this plan for. So the only thing we're going to be sending through the body of this request is going to be the user ID. So we're going to send the user ID of the user we want to generate, and that's it. Then I want to basically check to see if the user ID is valid. If it's not, I'll just return an error saying that the user ID is required. Then what's the next thing we want to do? Well, to generate our plan, we need to know the information about the user profile, meaning everything we just generated with the goal, experience, days per week, and so on, we need to have that. So we're going to access the profile information for this user based on the user ID by using Prisma and awaiting a Prisma user's profile. And we're going to call the find unique function, which allows us to find one row in a table based on some condition. Now, what is the condition? Well, because we're using a find unique here, it has to be a unique identifier for this row. Well, in our case, the unique identifier for the user profile is the user ID. So what we need is we need to pass here a where clause, which we're going to say we want to find the profile where the user ID is equal to the user ID. Then we're going to get back this profile. We want to check to see if it returns anything. If it doesn't find, for example, a user profile for that ID, we're going to get null in the user profile. So we're going to return an error 400 saying that the user profile was not found and that maybe the person needs to complete their onboarding. Then the next thing we want to do is we need to check to see what is the latest plan for this user. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, we're actually going to allow the user to regenerate their plans. So if they generated once, they can actually regenerate, and we want to know what versions of the plans it currently is in. But the thing is, to do any of that, right, we got to the point where we need the plan table, or more specifically, the plan schema. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to come here to our Prisma schema, and we're going to add a new model to our database. So it's similar to what we did before. We're going to add a model. We're going to call it training plans, and it's going to have similar fields to what we had previously. Now, the identifier for a training plan is going to be just an ID field, and I'm going to give it a type of string, and I'm going to use the ID tag, which we used over here, and I'm going to use the UUID tag, but I'm also going to specify that I want to generate a random UUID. That's just a function that is going to help us generate that ID for this field. Then I want to come here and set a user ID. Now, a user ID is going to be a reference to this field over here. So each user is going to have a user profile, and when they generate a plan, we're going to get the user ID for that profile and put it over here. So we're going to make this be the same time, DB UUID. Then we want to have a plan JSON. Now, what is this plan JSON? So the way we work with AI is very strategic, right? We're going to make a request to an LLM and we're going to get a response back. But when you're going to ChatGPT and you ask a question, sometimes it's a bit tough to get exactly what you want, right? And usually they return a variety of different lengths of text in a response. But if you specify in the prompt exactly how you want the response to come back, then you can actually make this data be readable in your website or your project. So the way we're going to structure our data from the response is going to be through a JSON. So I'm going to store the plan.json. It's basically the response from the LLM, but in JSON form. Same thing we're going to do, but for basically just the text response from the LLM, we're going to store that as well by making a plan text and making this a string. Then here comes the part that I was talking about. You can regenerate the plan. So we want to keep track of the version of the plan, which starts at 1 because it's the first time you generate the plan. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create an index, which is just a way for us to specify a way for us to query items in this table that is going to be more efficient and fast. So we're basically setting the user ID for a user to be an index. It's going to facilitate the performance of us querying this table. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come here and we're going to need to make the migration happen. So we're going to go down here to where we previously did this, and I'm going to run 2 different commands. I'm going to run npx prisma migrate dev, and then, or I think it's just this dev, and then we're going to put name, and I'm going to say plans. We're going to push that. Let's see if it migrates. It should work. And when it migrates, what we should see is that if I go here into our table or in our database, there should be a training plan table now. Now we want to generate our types. So I'm going to do npx prisma generates, and it should add the new plans to our types. Perfect. Now we have that. What do we want to do with it? Well, like I said, the first thing we need to do when we're trying to generate is see if this is the first time we're generating, right? So we want to, if it's not the first time, we want to get the latest plan. So we're going to do here const latest plan, and we're going to check to see if await prisma dot training plans dot find first. So we're going to try to find a plan where the user ID is equal to the ID. So if the user already has a plan, we're going to get that one. Also, they might have multiple plans, right? But we want to find the one where is sorted based on the version so that we get the latest one. So we're going to order it by the created at field, which is going to be descending. But it seems like there isn't a created at field. Let's take a look at this. Schema. Yeah, we forgot to add a created at. That's something that we definitely want. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to add a created at field. And because we made this mistake, we need to migrate it again. So I'm going to come here, clear this up, run a migration, say add created at. We're going to fix that issue. When that finishes migrating, I'm going to generate the types again. So it finished. I'm going to run the generate. So I'm going to close this up, clear, and we should have that as a option here. See, it's not an error anymore. Now we can also select it based on the version as well. So I'm going to select it based on the version, and this should return the plan in the table with the latest version. So if you generated your plan 5 times, the 5th one is going to be the one that shows up here. Now, why do we need that? Because if there is one, right, we're going to need to create this version variable, which is going to be either 1 or 1 plus the version of the latest plan. So if the latest plan exists, meaning you have generated a plan before, we're going to get the version and add 1. If it doesn't, we're just going to default this version to 1. Now, it's time for us to create a variable that is going to keep track of the result of our LLM query. So we're going to ask our AI to generate this plan, and we're going to get it back as a JSON, right? Now, there's going to be some logic here that we are not going to do it right now, or just in a second, but there's going to be a logic here that is going to call the AI and do all of that. But then when we get that back, I want to get the plan text, which is just going to be the JSON stringify of that plan JSON. We're going to set null and then 2 as the space. And when I get that back, I want to save the new plan into our table. So right now, this might be a bit confusing, right? Because we haven't even generated the plan with AI yet. But just ignore that for a second. That's going to happen over here. Right now, we're just creating the variable, not setting it to anything. But imagine that we have generated the plan. Then when we do get that result, I'm going to call Prisma, access the training plans, and create a new field there where we add the data. Now, what data do we want to add in here? Well, we're going to add the data for the training plan, the user ID, the JSON for the plan, and we're going to put it as any because it's very hard for us to specify the type that's going to come back, the plan text, and the version. So that's what we need. Then I'm just going to return a JSON with a success case, which is just the ID, the version, and the created ads. Just like this. Perfect. Now it's time for us to actually AI generate this. Now, how are we going to do that? Well, to do that, we're going to have to create a file in our lib, which we're going to use as a helper file for all AI related stuff. I'm going to call it ai.ts, but you can call it something more specific if you want to, but we're going to keep it like that. Now, in this file, we're going to need a couple things. First, we're going to need to access OpenAI. Now, we're not using any OpenAI models. We're not going to use GPT-5, GPT-4, or anything like that. Those are paid. We're going to be using free models. And honestly, for the purposes of this video, and even for your own projects, using free models are totally fine. The only problem is that a lot of free models either have rate limits or they use the data that you put in to train the model. So it's kind of a tricky way for them to get more data, right? Because they allow you to use the model, but all of the data that you input into it would not be technically private data, right? So if you were to make a website and you use it for a model, there's a high chance that you can't legally, unless you specify in your privacy notice that you're feeding models with that data. So we're importing OpenAI not because we're using a GPT model, but because they have a really good framework, a really good package that we can use to interact with LLMs. Now we can change the model that we use, but we can use the OpenAI package. Then I'm going to import .env from .env. We're going to come here and say .env.config just to have access to the .env. And then we're going to export async function called generate training plan. This is the function that we're going to be calling in our plan over here. Now, what do we want in this function? Well, this function is going to take in one prop, which is the profile. The profile is going to be of type user profile. Now, what is that type? Well, we can get user profile from a bunch of different places, but I want to specify even further what I want from it. So what I'm going to do is we're going to create here a types folder inside of our server, a new folder, types, similar to what we did in the front end. And I'm going to paste here all the types that I want for our backend, just normal TypeScript types. Now, one of the types that we want is going to be the user profile type. It's going to include everything that we've already defined previously when we were creating a user profile, and we can import it over here. Now, we're also going to accept a record, which is a map of either a string to any. Then we're going to set the return type of this. You get the profile, but what do you get back? You're going to get a promise that returns a training plan. Now, what is a training plan? Well, a training plan is something that we have to create here. So a training plan is going to be an ID, a user ID, an overview, which is going to be basically just the overview of the plan, a weekly schedule, a progression, and the version of the plan. So there's a couple new things here that obviously we're going to address now that is a bit different from what we defined in our schema. That's why we're not using directly the types from the table. So a training plan in the schema includes a bunch of stuff, but includes this plan JSON, right? What we get back from the AI. Now, this is how we're going to structure that. The overview is going to be the plan overview for what the plan is going to be looking like. So it's going to include, for example, the goal of the user, the frequency of how many times they're going to work out, their split, and any notes that the AI has for the user. So that's what we're going to store over here. Then the day schedule is a very clear scheduled piece where it's going to say what the user needs to work out on each day, what they need to focus on, and the exercises. Now the exercises are going to be an array of exercise, and the exercise type is going to be like this. It's going to have a name, the amount of sets, reps, rest, RPE, and any notes and alternatives. So it's going to be very specific to what we want the AI to do. Now, by creating those interfaces, you might already understand how we're going to specify for the model how we want our data back. So I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to import the training plan and we should be good to go. Next thing is we're going to come here and we need to normalize the profile data. So normalize profile data. How are we going to do this? Well, I'm going to create a normalized profile, which is going to take in the profile that we get back, and it's going to convert it into this user profile in case we get something a bit different. Now, by normalizing, we're basically just specifying in case some fields are not proper. So we're going to default, if there's no goal, we're going to default to bulk. If there's no experience, we're going to default to intermediate, and so on, because we're using a TypeScript. It's basically the same thing we did before, but we're just guaranteeing that there's going to be a value before we send it to the AI, because we don't want to pass on incorrect data and waste an API call. Now, the next thing we need to do is connect our API. Now, to connect our API, we're going to be using a service that is completely free. It's not sponsored in this video. I just use them sometimes when I'm going to connect to an AI model, especially if it's a free one. And I'm talking about OpenRouter. So I want you guys to create an account with OpenRouter. I already have one over here, and then click on Get API Key. So you're going to see yourself in this page. Now you want to click to create a new API key, and we're going to call this AI Gym project. I don't know, I'll call it whatever. You can call it whatever you want. You can put a credit limit. The thing is, we're not going to be paying, right? We're going to be using free models. Now I'm going to put an expiration day of 7 days. So by the time you see this video, this won't be a valid API key no matter what. And then I'm going to click on create. You should see that we should get the new API key over here. Now you need to copy it and note it down because this will never show up again. So now we're going to come back to our code and we're going to go to our env file over here and we're going to add the OpenRouter key and pass in this value. Perfect. Then I'm going to close this up and we're going to come to our AI here and we're going to get that value inside of here by creating a variable called API key and accessing the variable. If there is no API key, we want to throw an error. But most likely, unless you're doing something stupid when you deploy, you just saw me adding this to our .env, right? Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to initialize our OpenAI client and change the model that we want to use because we're using OpenRouter rather than OpenAI. We didn't actually create an OpenAI account and got an OpenAI API key. We're using OpenRouter, which allows us to use multiple models and just test different models if we want to for the same information. Now, to use OpenRouter on OpenAI, we create an OpenAI variable, set it equal to OpenAI, and then we pass in the API key. But here's the important thing. You need to change the base URL to be the base URL of OpenRouter. So OpenRouter lets us set a base URL of openrouter.ai/API/v1. So this is what you need to put in order to use OpenRouter using OpenAI. I know it's a bit confusing if you're not familiar with them, but OpenAI is obviously a company that has a couple models, but OpenRouter allows you to access all models, and then you just need to change whatever, and you just pay through OpenRouter. The next thing I want to do is set some default headers. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to set default headers, set it to localhost 3001 or the base URL. We haven't set the base URL here, so I'm going to actually do that. Or have we? No, we haven't. I'm going to create here base URL and then just set it to localhost 3001. Then, I need to do this as well because this is just the base URL of our backend. Then below this, we're done with creating our instance of OpenAI, and it's time for us to build our prompt. Now, how are we going to build this prompt? Well, I'm actually going to create a function that is going to do that called build prompt, because building prompts is actually something very, very like specific and really hard to do. So we're gonna organize our prompt in a place to very easily be able to manage it later. Now, this build prompt function will exist down here. We're gonna call it build prompt. It's gonna take in a user profile, and it's gonna pass here user profile and return a string. Now, what is this prompt gonna look like? Well, first, we need to specify, we're talking to an AI, right? So we want to write a prompt that is gonna be in text form. That's how we interact with the AI. But it might include some stuff that is formatted in a different way. For example, when I talk to the AI, I want to specify what is the goal of the user, right? So I'll create a map to specify the goal of the user. It's going to be a record, which is a string, and a string, right? It has two options. Now, how do we talk about the goal? The user can choose if they're bulking, cutting, recomposition, strengthening, whatever they want. But that's not enough, right? We need to be a little bit more specific to the AI. So we're going to translate the data we get from the user profile into text that the AI will understand. For example, if the user set their goal in the user profile to be cutting or bulking, that will be translated to the prompt to be text saying that they want to build muscle and gain size. Similarly, if they want to cut, just lose fat and maintain muscle. So it's easier for us we get the data with one word, but we translate it to the AI with multiple words, because I think the AI will understand what bulking is, but we want to be more specific. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to map each property and option from the user profile into some text that the AI will understand. We're going to do this with the goal map, but we're also going to do this with the experience map. We're going to explain what a beginner is, right? Because beginner for some people might be different than beginner for another. So we're going to specify that it's a person with 0 to 1 years of experience. Intermediate, same thing, and advanced, same thing. Equipment, we're going to specify as well what full gym is, what home is, and what dumbbells are. Then the split. We give a bunch of options, and we're going to specify exactly what it is. The split is a bit more obvious, right? Because I guess the names are a bit obvious, but we're going to either way transform some object key into text. And then finally, we're going to return the prompt based on that. So I'm going to create here a prompt, and I'm going to use backticks because we're going to be inserting a lot of JavaScript into text. And I'm going to say create a personalized, and then I want to insert how many days per week the user wants to work out. We can get that from the profile. So we called it user profile. So I'm going to just say user profile dot days per week. So I want to create a personalized days per week, day per week. So if they choose 3, it's going to be create a personalized 3-day per week training plan for someone with the following profile. Now, I'm not going to show myself typing this entire prompt, right? Because this is going to be a bit tedious, but here is what we're going to do. So this is the profile information. And what is the profile going to look like? Well, it's going to look like this. Well, I'm pasting some code here, but I realized it might be better to just call this profile, because then I can just switch one. But basically we're saying create a personalized 3 or 4 or 5 day per week training plan for someone with the following profile. And then we insert their goal, their experience level, their session per length, their equipment, and their preferred split. And also if they have any injuries, we're going to insert that. Now, we're not just inserting the value from the profile. We're actually mapping the values, the strings that we wrote over here based on those values. Then we sent this. But the AI is very unpredictable, right? They might just return a huge essay as a response, or maybe they just reply in like a couple words. So we have to specify how we want to get this response. And here's how we're going to do that. We're going to put generate a complete training plan in JSON format with this exact structure. And then we specify the JSON structure that we want to get. And this is how I decided. So the JSON will look like this. It will have an overview, a weekly schedule, array, and a progression. Does this sound familiar? It's exactly what we defined a training plan to be like over here. So we know for a fact that we're going to get this JSON object back. We just need to parse it, and then all of a sudden, the response from the LLM makes sense to our TypeScript code. Now, there's a couple more things. The AI might be a bit stubborn, so we need to add some requirements. For example, I want to make sure to emphasize that they need to create exactly the amount of workout days as the user has chosen. Also, each workout needs to fit into the length, right? Because that's what we specified. We need to include around 4 to 6 exercises per workout. Now you can even add more like options if you want. You can make the user choose how many exercises per workout, but I think 4 to 6 is what I do. So I think it's what people do as well. If you do if you do 10 exercises per workout, maybe you're working out too much. Then we need to specify what the RPE is, rate of perceived exertion should be 6 to 9. Also, two more things. We want to include compound movements. So if you watch gym content on Instagram, or you're just in the gym, you know about compound movements and how it's glazed as the most important thing you should do to increase your strength and your muscle mass. And we're also going to specify that you need to match the preferred split type as they chose. Finally, let's just add the last three. I want to specify that the user needs to, the AI needs to focus on the injuries for the user in case they edit anything. Also provide exercise alternatives where appropriate and make it progressive and suitable for their experience level. That's good to go, right? However, I like to do one more thing, and a lot of people do as well, which is specify at the end that they can only return JSON. No markdown and no extra text, because sometimes you would ask them to return this and then they would return this, but they would start by saying, okay, awesome, here is your JSON. And then it just break the response because it's not what you were expecting, right? So right now we finally finished this prompt and we are good to go. So we're going to call the build prompt function up here and we're going to pass the normalized profile. Good, right? Now we're going to make the API call to OpenAI. Now we're going to add a try catch, and for the error, we're going to just throw any errors that might happen and also console the error saying that there was an issue with fetching the data and running the AI. But then how do we prompt the AI? Well, we're going to create a variable called completion, which is the result of what the AI gives us. We're going to await OpenAI, specify that we're using the chat functionality, and then access completions and call the create function. The create function allows us to, now in here, we need to specify the model. Now the model kind of depends, right? You have a lot of models that you can put over here that they even suggest, but a lot of them are obviously paid, right? Now, the way I find free models is you go to OpenRouter and you search free. And then there's a bunch of them that says free and you can look at them, how they, like why they're free, right? The one I'm going to be using is this NVIDIA Nemotron 3 Nano. They have a couple other ones if you want to check them out. You can check depending on the amount of volume that they do, but I'm going to choose this one. And you just click here to copy. You go back here and you add that model here. Then we say messages. Messages includes different parts of the prompt that we want to specify. The first is we want to specify to the system that is going to give us a response, who they are and what kind of response we want to get back. So we're literally saying that they are an expert fitness trainer and a program designer. We're specifying that they need to respond with valid JSON and they cannot include any. We're just reiterating that, right? Then we'll add the user role, which is what is the actual prompt, like what you would write for ChatGPT. And the content is going to be the prompt that we get back from the build prompt function. We can add more specifications. For example, we can come here and below the messages, we can add a temperature and a response format to specify even more that it's a JSON object. Temperature, if you want to get into that, is just you can actually play around with how random and how specific you want your response to be like. Now, there's always a perfect amount depending on what you're working on. So you want to play around with that value. I played around a very small amount. It doesn't really make that much difference on a project like this, but I played around in 0.7 is perfectly fine. Then we're going to come here, say const content, and we're going to get back the content by accessing the completion, accessing the choices, getting the first response from the list of choices that they give us back, and then accessing the message with the content. Now we have the content. What is this content? This is exactly what is replied back from the AI. So right off the bat, we want to check to see if there's no content, because if there's no content, then for some reason the AI didn't return anything, but most likely it will. So we need to parse it. So I'm going to get the plan data and parse using the JSON.parse function, and I'm going to parse that JSON. Perfect. Now I want to return back that JSON, but hear me out. This is probably not good enough because we want to specify the way we want to return this, which is training plan. So it includes some stuff that we currently don't have on this AI response. So instead of returning plan data, I want to return a format plan response function, which is going to include, is going to require us to pass the AI response, which we don't know. We can guarantee what it's going to come back as. So I'm going to make it be any. And we want to return accept the profile, which is going to be of type user profile. And then this is wrong, right? Because sorry about that. This is not where we should do this. We should do this over here. So function, format, plan response. I'll just copy this, paste it here. Okay. And then this, we just pass the plan data and the profile. Now, what do we get here? Well, Oh, this is normalized profile, sorry. Well, in the format plan response, we want to return back a training plan. So I'm going to specify that this returns back a training plan. And inside of here, I want to first get the plan. I'll construct it. It's going to be an object that contains an overview. I want to specify here that this is going to be of type training plan. It's going to have a overview. It's going to have a weekly schedule, and this is going to be an array actually. And then it's also going to have a progression. Now, the progression is going to be a text, I think, and the overview is where we're going to start. Now, for the overview, what I want is to specify the goal, and we're going to get the goal by getting the AI response. And hopefully from the AI response, based on how we specify the prompt, we get the goal by accessing the overview.goal. So we're going to come here and say AI response.overview. But we need to put a question mark because we're not sure that that is a type, .goal. And in case this isn't a valid type, so they didn't return that, we're going to default it to say customized and then add the goal program. Now we're going to do the same thing for the frequency, the split, and the nodes. So I don't need to repeat myself. I'll just paste this over here. And this is how it should look. Perfect. Then for the weekly schedule, it's a bit harder. We need to loop through the AI response by saying AI response.weeklyschedule.map. However, there's no guarantee that the weekly schedule is going to be an array. So we need to first check to see if it is an array. If not, we need to default to an empty array, because then if we don't, the map function will actually throw an error and will break your app. Then for each day of type any, we're going to return an object. Now the object will have the format of day, which is going to be just day.day. I know this is a bit confusing, but you'll see. And then we'll default to a text saying day. But we're basically just following this format, right? A weekly schedule is a day schedule, which includes a day, a focus, and an exercise. So which day of the week it is, what are they focusing on, and what exercises they're doing. So we're going to do this. We're going to add the focus as well, and we're going to add the exercises. But for the exercises, we're going to need to do the exact same thing we did here, where we check to see if the day dot... Wait, why is this not working? Oh, sorry about that. We need to do this and then add another close over here. Yeah, sorry about that. That probably looked a bit confusing to you guys. But we're going to do day.exercises, default to an empty array, and then do a map, get the exercise, which is going to be of type any, because again, it's really hard for us to get types with AI responses. And then in here, each exercise will have this format. Oh my God, I almost made the same mistake. It's going to have the following format. It's going to have a name, sets, reps, rest, RP, and so on. So this is how we're going to actually structure it. We're going to get the name, default to exercise, sets, default to 3, whatever, reps, rest, RP, notes, and alternatives. Finally, the progression, we're just going to get the AI response.progression or default it to this text over here. So if you understood what I did here is I basically formatted the entire response from the AI, but I had to default a bunch of values just in case this isn't proper. Now, I'll return this plan and you see that it doesn't work fully because it doesn't include, for example, the user ID and the ID, but we don't have that yet. So actually the type we want to put for the training plan is not going to be just training plan. It's going to be training plan, but we want to omit the ID, the user ID, the version, and the created at. Same thing with this, and we should be good to go now. Now, in here, we're returning the result of that. But it's again an error because when we return the generate training plan, we don't want to return just a promise with a training plan. We want to return a promise with a training plan, omitting the ID, the user ID, the version, and the created at. And now we are pretty much done. I know that was a lot, but we're good to go here. We can come to this plan, and guess what? We can actually utilize it. I'm going to come here and I'm going to add a try and a catch, which is going to catch any errors. Now for the errors, we're going to add the generic error messages, but this one I'm actually going to specify even more because this is generation of a plan, which is the main core feature here. And what I want to do is I want to try to get the plan JSON and await a generate training plan and then pass the profile. I need to set this equal to this. And now we should be good to go. Do you want to test this? Well, to test this, we need to make an API request to the generate endpoint. Now, For us to call this endpoint, what we need to do is go back to the onboarding. And on the onboarding, right after we save the profile, we want to generate the plan. Now to generate the plan, we're going to create a generate plan function in our use auth, and we're going to call it here. Now for the generate plan function, I'm going to come up here. We can even create it over here and just copy the save profile, paste it here, and call this generate plan. Then the argument of this function is going to actually be nothing. We don't need to pass anything for the plan. We're going to get the profile from the database. Then we need to check for the user, and we'll just say here, change this to say generate plan. And instead of calling API.saveProfile, what we're going to do instead is we're going to call the API.generatePlan. So we're going to create a generate plan function on our API, and we're also going to need to pass in the neon user .id, or actually, do we have, neon user.id. Now, to create the generate plan function, we're going to come to our API, which should be over here, API. And in the API layer, we're going to create a new function, which is also going to be a post request. We're going to call this generate plan, just like this. And it's going to require a user ID. Now, this post request will allow us to pass in a request to the /plan/generate, because if you remember in our API here for plan, we made this be a /generate, and the router itself, where we call it in our app, our index.ts, we already have the generate path or the plan path. So it's plan/generate. Then I'm going to utilize this user ID to insert it. It's the only thing we need from here. And that's pretty much it. Just like that, we're going to be able to generate a plan based on it. So we're going to actually, in our auth context here, we're going to return this as a value here. We're going to come up here and add this as a part of the value. I can also delete this is generating. I forgot to do that, but I'm going to copy this definition, add the generate plan as a type. And this requires us to just have actually, it doesn't require anything, I believe. Yeah. And now in our onboarding, I can import this from the use auth. So generate plan, just like that, I can call the generate plan after the is generating. Perfect. Now, after generating the plan, I want to navigate to the profile screen. But what is the navigate function? Well, the navigate function is a function that we can use from React Router that is going to allow us to be able to navigate between pages in a functional way. Now, to get that, we actually need to use the use navigate hook. So I'm going to do here use navigate from React Router DOM, and we can put a route here that we want to navigate, which in this case is going to be the profile route. Now we can actually test. So in the profile screen right now, absolutely nothing happens. However, this plan that is false should actually change now, depending on if we have it or not. For now, I'm just going to make this be true just for a second, because I do want to see the profile page when we get navigated, and we can come back here. Now you see there's absolutely nothing in our training plans. Now there's a chance that it might not work because models are unpredictable. However, I think we can actually set this up in a proper way. So actually, I'm going to delete the profile we created just because I want to generate it again. So I'm going to come here, say I want to build muscle. I'll just keep it the same way. I'll put 5 times a week. I want to do let the AI decide. And I'm going to open up our inspect element, network tab, and let's see what happens when I generate the plan. So there seems to be an issue with the generate, and that's because apparently the profile is not found. Now the profile should have been created. Maybe there's a bit of a delay in between the period in which it was generated and itself saving the profile. Okay guys, so bad news and good news. Bad news, it didn't work. Good news, I know exactly why it didn't work. So let's fix this. So the reason why it didn't work is actually due to a race condition. So over here, when we call the save profile, and then we call the generate plan, the profile created on the save profile is technically not immediately done before we call the generate plan. And if you look at the API layer for our generate plan, which is on the plan here, the first thing we do is we query for the user profile table. Now, you might be asking yourself, how is that possible? Since we know for a fact that the user is created on the save profile and we await for it. So shouldn't there be a promise that is resolved before we move forward to the generate plan? Technically, but not the way that we wrote it right now. Because if we go here to our API layer, we should return the promise here so that it doesn't auto resolve. This will fix everything. So if we go here, we try to create it again. I'm going to move it to 5 times a week. That's okay. That's okay. Let AI decide. I'll generate my plan. Right off the bat, you see that I don't get auto navigated because it's generating the plan. But hear me out. This is a free plan, so it might take a little bit to generate. So I'll be back in a second when this is done. Perfect. As you can see, I got navigated, but the generate here seems to have generated something. So I'm going to go here, refresh the user profile. User was created, refresh, or I don't even need to refresh, but it looks like there's a JSON that was generated by our AI with good exercises or whatever the AI decided for us on our weekly schedule. So now we're pretty much good to go. And all we have to do is display that information in our screen. Now, how are we going to do that? Well, to display that information, we first need to be able to get the information for the plan of the user. So we're going to keep just working with some of the backend for now. We're going to come to the plan over here, and I'm going to create a new endpoint, but this time is going to be the endpoint to get the current plan. Because it is a get functionality, this is going to be a get request, and the name is going to be current, meaning we're getting the current plan. Now we're going to wrap this around with a try catch and put any errors here. Now what I want to do in the error section is just the same thing I always do, just console error and return a 500. And for the getting section is actually pretty simple. First, in this get request, we're going to ask for a user ID to be sent as part of a query in this request. I'll show you guys how to do that. Then, if there isn't a user ID, we return an error. But if there is, we want to query for the user or for the plan of that user ID. Now we're going to find the first, meaning we're going to get only one back and it's going to be the first, since a user might have multiple plans. Now, the way we know for a fact that it is the latest one is because we are ordering it based on the latest one that was created. We're ordering it based on created at on descending order. Now, if no plan is found, we are going to return an error. But if a plan is found, we're going to return a JSON response with the ID, the user ID, the plan JSON, the plan text, the version, and the created at. So exactly the way we defined what a plan is. So now we're going to get that back. So we can go here to our API layer and start generating the new version, the new function, right? The get function, because we had the post, but we don't have the get because we never need it. So the get is actually going to be pretty simple. What we want to do is we're going to go here and say const res is equal to, and we're going to fetch the same way, but I'm going to put this because we don't need to put method headers or body. So with the get, it's going to be the base URL /API /path the exact same way. I'm going to request here the path, but then as a response, we're going to return the JSON, exactly what we did here, exactly the same thing. But then on the API layer here, for example, for the get current plan, which is a function we're going to create to get the current plan for the user, we need to request a user ID. And then the way we send this user ID through this get request is we're going to return a get, and we're going to pass the /plan/current. And because it's a query, we can pass a query param. For example, a question mark here, and then say user ID is equal to, and then pass a value for the user ID. Just make sure that you name this the same thing you named this over here, or this, so that we can actually get the correct value. Now we should be making a request to that endpoint. Now, what do we want to do with this? Well, to do this, we're going to create a function in our auth provider. So I'm going to come here to our auth provider, and it's kind of a consistent pattern, right? You see, we do first the API layer, the endpoint, then we go to the API layer on our front end, and then we go to our auth context where we share that information. Now, I want to actually do something a bit different. I want to create a refresh data function, which, because we're not implementing caching here, we're going to use this function as kind of our way to just invalidate data and make it that we need to get the latest data, right? Now, the way I'm going to do this is by actually memoizing it. So I'm going to memoize this function since it's going to be used a lot and we want to prevent infinite loops. So I'm going to create here a function, but I'm going to call it refresh data. I'm going to put it underneath a use callback. So this function is going to be an async function, and the function is going to start by first checking to see if the neon user is true, and we want to keep track of whether or not we're currently refreshing the data to prevent infinite loops. And the easiest way for us to do this is not actually by using a state, because that would be counterintuitive and could cause more issues. We're actually going to use a use ref. We're going to create a reference called isRefreshingRef to know if we're currently refreshing our data. I'm going to use the useRef and I'm going to set that to be false. And then I'm going to check here right off the bat if the neon user doesn't exist or the isRefreshing.current is true. Because if it is currently refreshing, we don't want to refresh anymore. We don't want to fetch more data for the latest data. Remember, this function is supposed to fetch both the current profile, the most up-to-date profile, and the most up-to-date plan. Then we're going to set this to be true because now it is time for us to actually refresh the data. We're going to do a try catch finally. So we're going to do try catch. Any errors, and I believe we do a finally on this one, so I'm going to do a finally here, and on the finally we set it to false. That's how we keep track of it. Then on the catch, we're just going to console.error. It's not that big of a deal. Then on the try, what we want to do is we want to do two things. We want to fetch profile and we want to fetch plan. For the profile, the way we're going to fetch it is we're going to get the profile data and we're going to call a function that currently doesn't exist, that is going to be similar to the get current plan function, but we don't have that yet. But I'm just going to let that be like that so that we can have an idea of how it's going to look later. Now for the plan data, it's going to be like this. We're going to get the plan data, set it equal to await API.get current plan, not generate, get current plan, pass the user.id, it should be neon user actually. And we're also gonna just catch any errors in case there's any and just default the error to null or just return a null. Now, if there is a plan data, so if plan data, we want to create a state that is gonna keep track of that plan. So I'm gonna create here a state called plan and set plan. And this state will have the following type. It's gonna have a type of training plan. Now we haven't created this type yet, but we kind of already have that type in our backend. Now we could technically just come here and kind of getting like a mess of files, but I'm gonna come here to this types thing, copy the entire thing for the training plan, and then just come here to our types and paste it in here. Now we can close both of these, come back here and import training plan. Perfect. Then we're going to come here to our fetch data. By the way, this is only an error because I haven't added the dependency list on the use callback. I'm going to do that. I could technically just do it right now. The dependency list here is just every time the user ID, the neon user, ID changes, we flip, we switch, or we refresh this function. Now, what we do with the plan data is we want to set the result of this. Now, the result is going to look like what we expect. It's going to have a plan JSON, right? Exactly how it looks in our table with an overview, a plan JSON with a weekly schedule, a plan JSON with the progression. We know this because I just checked this and it looks exactly like that, right? So it has the plan JSON and it properly matches that. So what we're going to do is we're going to set the values to have a ID of plan data.id, user ID of user ID, and so on. Now we're pretty much done with this. All that we have to do left is pass this as a function here in our value and also define this up here. Now the function is going to be simple. It's going to be exactly like the generate plan, so we don't have to worry about that. Now we can also pass a plan as a type. I'm going to do that. Plan is going to be a training plan or null. Then let's come down here, pass this as a value as well, plan, and now we are ready to consume that. But to be honest, the refresh plan is something that we actually mostly use inside of here. Like after we generate the plan, I'm gonna use refresh data here. I'm also going to do the same thing. I'm going to await refresh data, and I'm going to do the same thing after we save the profile. And then let's go here to, let's close a bunch of this stuff for now, and let's open the file for the profile. This is where we want to go now. Now we actually have the data for the plan, so we don't need to use this. So we can see if the user has a plan, they should be able to go to the profile. Let's see, and we can't. But the only reason why we can't is not because we don't have something. See, now it actually lets us. It was just because if we don't refresh the page, then the data is never fetched. So now we have fetched the data and we can access the plan. Now, what do we do in this page? Well, the profile screen is going to be pretty important. It should show the exact UI for our schedule, right? Our actual gym plan. So I'm going to open this up over here. Let's make it smaller and we can start building this. Now, the first thing is we're going to make a div here that is going to encompass the entire screen. I'll delete this and we're going to create a section that is going to be the container of our div. Then we'll create the header. For the header, I want to set a set of elements that is gonna actually have a gap between the elements. The items are going to be centered in a medium screen, and it's going to depend on the size. So it's fully responsive. Then in here, we're going to add a div with an h1 tag that is going to say your training plan. Now, can we even see this? I guess not right now, but we're going to be able to see it soon. So if I come here and I say P, I'm going to add here a version, which is going to be the version of the plan. So plan.version. And I also want to add a created at. So I'm going to say created, and then we're going to insert a date. Now, currently, is there an error in here? Why is it not refreshing? Let's see. Inspect console. So there seems to be an error. It says cannot read properties of ID. So I know where this error is, actually. I kind of thought it might have been a problem. My bet is that it's right over here, and my bet was correct. So if we go here to my plan. Oh, no, this is my plan, I think. Let me see. Profile. Oh. So it's not refreshing the plan. Let's see. Network, come here. Let's go to the profile. Interesting. Yeah, it just navigates us back. That's because we haven't actually generated or fetched the plan right from the start. Now, why is that an issue? That's an issue because we are only refreshing data, meaning we're only fetching the plan either after we generate the plan or we save the profile. And we already did that. I mean, in the real world, this wouldn't be an issue because it would be sequential, but we also want to load the profile and the plan immediately when the user is available. So you know how we have this whole use effect to fetch the user? We're going to have a similar thing, but this is going to be for fetching the profile and the data. So we're going to come here and we're going to say if user loading, do we have a user loading and is loading? So if it's not loading the data for the user yet, then we're also going to check to see if the user, the neon user.id is valid, then I want to refresh the data. If not, oh my God, this is running infinitely. I'm sorry about that. I don't want to get rate limited. No, that's fine. So the problem is that I need to put a dependency array here. That's all I needed to do. And you'll see that this doesn't have issues anymore. Now, this should be an else case. And in here, if there's no issue, then we're going to set the plan to be null. And at the end here, we're going to set is loading to false. Now, we're going to make this take in two things. This should change if the user, the neon user, .id changes, or if the is loading changes. So now let's go to my plan, or let's go to profile. Should fetch the plan, and it should still keep us here. Now, there might be an error still. Now the error is at 61. Where is the 61? Oh, again, same error. Okay, now let's go to profile, and we actually reached the page. So sorry about that. We finally got rid of the errors, but you guys could see me debugging, which I think is a good thing. So we can see this over here. Let's continue building the screen. We want to be able to add some classes to this h1 tag. So I'm just going to add here a text 3XL and also a margin bottom. For the P tag, we're going to add some color to it. I'm really unsure why it's sometimes React, the syntax, the compiler just has some issues with that. But the next thing we want to do is we want to actually make a function that is going to help us format the date from the plan. We're going to create here a format date function that is going to allow us to pass here the plan.created@, and is going to format it in a readable date. So I'm going to create this function here. We're going to do it up here, const format date. And actually, I'll make this into a function, format date. And this should take in a date string, which is a string. Now, what this does is it returns a new date using that date string, and it converts it to local date string. So to local date string. Why is that not allowing me to? Oh, I'm stupid, guys. This should be where we put that. Okay, then I'm gonna say English US, and I want to specify how I want to structure this date. So this is how I'm gonna do it. The month is gonna be short. The day is going to be numeric, the year numeric, the hour 2-digit, minute 2-digit. So it looks like this. Created February 19th, 2026, 8:02 p.m., which is right now. So I guess you know what time I'm doing all of this. So the next thing is we want to add a section below this. So below this div, we want to add a button from our component library. And this button is going to allow the user to regenerate a plan. Now, the way we're going to do this is I'm going to add here a refresh CCW icon, and we're going to add a regenerate plan text. Now, the icon obviously is not going to be that big. We're going to add a class name here to make it smaller. And the button is also not going to be that big. we're gonna add, actually we're gonna add a gap between the buttons, and we're gonna make the variant of it be secondary. So it's not gonna look that apparent. Now, the next thing we wanna do with this div is, right now we're going to leave the button as it is, but we're going to come down one div from here and we're going to create the overview cards. So this is the card that shows the information about the plan. To start things off, I'm going to add this division for each card. And to add the card, we just use our component. As you can see, we can add multiple of them. All of them are going to be a variant bordered, so they have a little border. And I want to make the items have a centered look with a gap between them. Now in the card, we're going to start with the first one, which is the goal. So I'm going to add a div here, and I'm going to add an icon to represent that goal. So target is a good icon for that. Below this, I'm going to add a div, which is going to have 2 p tags. Now for all of these cards, it's going to look almost the same. So we're going to have goal, and then it's going to be the actual goal. Now to get the actual goal, I'm going to say plan.overview.go, and this is what it's going to show. Then we're going to add some styles to this. I'm going to add a class name to this div over here for the icon to push it a bit to the side, and we're going to change its color so that it has the accent color. So it's green. For the text, we're going to add a muted color for the first text. And for the second one, we're going to make it a font medium, so it's not really boldy. Perfect. Now we want to do the exact same thing, but for all the other cards. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to paste it a couple more times, and we're going to do it for the other ones. Now for the other ones, here's what we want. This is going to be the schedule. So I'm going to make calendar here, and I'm going to render the frequency. This will say frequency. And then we're going to add the next one. This will be for we're going to use a dumbbell icon, and it's going to represent the split. So I'm going to say split, and the result we get back from the AI is going to be the split. Then for the last one, we're going to use the trending up icon. By the way, you can use any icons you want. I just prefer this ones. And this is just going to be the version of this plan. And then we'll just say plan.version. Now, I know this looks a bit big, but hear me out. This is how it looks in the bigger screen. It's just because we're building right now with the screen smaller, but it is fully responsive. It changes to only one column because of this style that we added over, was it here? No, it was here. So you see, we changed the amount of items in the screen, or the amount of columns. If it's a medium screen and above, we set it to 4. Anything else is not going to be. It's going to be just 1. Perfect. Now, below this, we want to add the plan notes in case there's any notes in the plan. So we're going to add a card that is variant bordered again, and class name of margin bottom of 8. Now this card is going to be simple. We're going to add only 2 things, and I'll just show it to you. We're going to add a program notes and any notes that the AI has. So the AI left these notes. The program balances push, pull, and lower body emphasis with adequate volume and all that kind of stuff. The mumbo jumbo that the AI put here. Now, below this card, we want to add the weekly schedule, the actual weekly schedule. And this will be a little bit more difficult. So I'm going to put here weekly schedule. Now on this one, we want to add an H2 tag with a class name here that says font semi-bold, text XL, and margin bottom 4. And then this will say weekly schedule. Now below this, we want to add the display for the week. But right now, this is actually going to be a lot of code. Actually, not for this specific, but it's going to be a sequence of components. So it's better for us to create a folder in our components folder here that is not going to be layout, it's not going to be UI, but it's going to be for the plan. We're going to create here a plan folder, and we're going to create a file called plan display. Okay, so now for the plan display, we're going to export a function here called plan display. It's going to take in a weekly schedule. It's going to be of type plan display props. We're going to make that type, and we're going to return a div. Now, what is the type for plan display props? We're going to make it be of type, I'll go up here, and it's going to be of type day schedule. We can import that from our types, and in the return statement here, we're actually going to return just a single thing, which is we're going to loop through the list of the weekly schedule, map through it, and we want to go through each schedule and return a date card. Now, what is a date card? A date card is going to be another component that we're going to make. It's going to require us to pass in 2 things. First is going to be the key. So we're just going to pass here the key so that React knows how to properly organize this list. And then the schedule, which is going to be just the schedule. Now, what I need to do is, oh, this is definitely not right. So I actually need to remove this and then do this. So now I need to create the day card function. The day card function is going to exist over here. I'm going to make it above this, and it's going to be a component that is going to take in a schedule. So just a single schedule that will be of type day schedule. So I'll say schedule of type day schedule. Now in here, we're going to return a card. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to import this component here. So below here, we're just going to import the plan display, and we're going to pass the weekly schedule, which is going to be of plan.weekly schedule. So you should see that we should see here now the amount of days in the week that we chose. So we chose 5 days, I think, for the schedule. It's going to be 5 cards because it's looping through the final result. Now let's add the UI for each result. So first, the card here, we want to make it be bordered. And I'm also making the class name here, the overflow, to be hidden. Now, inside of this card, let's add a div, another div inside of it, just 2 divs. And we're going to add first the information about the day of the schedule. So we're going to add here schedule.day. So it's going to be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Then next, I'm going to add a P tag, which I will add the focus of that day. So I'll say schedule.focus. So Monday, upper body push, Tuesday, lower body, upper body, lower body, full body. That's what they chose. Now below this, we're going to add another div, and this will be the actual exercise, but we're not going to show the list right now. We're just going to show the amount of them. So I'm going to put an icon here, which is going to be for the number of exercises. So I'm going to put a dumbbell icon, and I want to set a span, which will show the schedule.exercises.length, and that amount is going to be the amount of exercises we're doing that day. It's around 5 on all of them actually, which is pretty interesting. Then on the div here, we're going to add a table because we're going to add the exact exercise for each day, the order and what we do for each. So for the table, we're going to have a head of the table, and the head of the table is going to have a row, and this row is going to have a th for the exercises. Technically, this actually won't be exercise, it will be just exercise. We're going to have one for the sets and reps. So sets, X reps, and we're going to have one for the rest time. Now, I know the UI looks really ugly, but we're going to address that. And we're going to have one for the RP. Perfect. Then, because this is a table, we have the table head, we need to have the table body. So in here, what I want to do is I want to render the schedule.exercises.map. We're going to map through each of them. And for now, we're just going to render a simple UI here, which would just have a div with the exercise.name for now, just like this. But obviously we're going to change all of this. I'm just going to add really quickly the classes for this section. So first, for this major div here, we're going to add a section, a display flags. We're going to center the items and justify in between so that this and this are separated. Then for the text here, we're going to make it be larger. And for the P tag, we're going to make it be green. So the focus is going to have the accent color. Then for the section of the amount of exercises, we're going to add the following classes, and we're going to make the dumbbell icon here be a little bit smaller. That's all we need to do. Then for the table container, we're going to add an overflow X of auto, and we're going to push some stuff to the left as well. Then for the table, we're going to set the width to be full and the text to be actually small. And then for the TR, which is this section here, we're going to make the color be muted for the each individual column. And we're also going to add some specific classes for each of the THs. So the main one is going to be exercise. It's going to be aligned to the left, but the other ones are actually going to be all the same. We're going to have all of them just be on the right, or at least a little bit more to the right. And they're all going to have a font of medium, but the exercise is the one that is mostly to the left. And we're going to have the reps, the rest, and the RPE. Now, what do we do? Well, we want to make the UI for each of the rows in this table. Right now, we're just putting the exercise, but we actually need to make it such that it shows the exercise, the reps, and the rest, and the RPE. So sorry for doing this again, but I want to create a new component. We're going to create here a component called exercise row. And this component will take in 2 props, exercise and the index. Now, what are they? Well, the exercise is going to be of type exercise, which is a type we have, and index is going to be a number. Now, what does this mean? It means that when we call this component, which is going to be over here, we actually want to pass in the key as an index. So I'm going to pass here exercise is going to be exercise, and index is going to be key. Perfect. Now there's an error here. It cannot be used as a JSX component. Why not? Oh, because we're not returning anything. So let's just return something over here. I'm going to return a TR, which is the point of it, and it should be gone. Perfect. Now there might be an error exercise. Which one did I write wrong? I wrote one of them wrong. Oh, it's just because we're not using them. So let's use them. So to get things started, I'm going to add a TR with a TD and then a div. Then in this div, we're going to add a span, which should show the order or the number of the exercise. So each exercise will be ordered from 1 to 5, right? Because there's 5 exercises per thing. So that's why we need the index, because here we're going to show that this is the exercise of index plus 1, right? So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're also going to put a dot here to represent that it's a list, right? Then we want to show the information of the exercise. So like the name. So we're going to add a div with a p tag that is going to show the exercise.name. Then in this p tag, we're going to add another p tag, but this one is going to be actually in case there's any notes for the exercise. So we'll put a p tag here and we're going to put an info component and we're going to show the exercise.notes. Now we're going to style this, of course, but for now we're good to go. Then below this TD, we're going to add the second one. This is just for exercise. Now we want to add the reps. So we're going to add a TD here with a span, which is going to show the exercise sets. So we're going to show exercise.sets. And then I want to make this be actually an exercise sets versus the reps. So I'm going to show the reps here, and then in the middle I'm going to just put like an X. It's like exercise X reps, and I might put a space here as well. Perfect. Then we can build the next one, which is just the rest information. I'm going to put here a TD. We're going to just add a span and then just show the exercise.rest. Perfect. And then for the final, the RPE TD, we're going to add here a TD, and on this one we want to basically just insert the exercise RPE, but the styling will be a little bit more complicated for this one. Perfect. Now, what do we do? Well, let's start with the styling. So I'm going to start in this TR over here. We're going to add a border between each of them because it's a table. Then on the first TD, I'm going to add a PY of 3 and a PR of 4. We're going to add a display flex and set the items to the start so that everything is aligned to the left. Start basically means that, since we're going from left to right. Then we're changing the color of the number here. We're going to make it gray so that it's muted and a little bit smaller. Then the font on the p tag here for the name is going to be medium, so it's a little bit more bold. And for the exercise notes, we're going to add this class name here so that it's smaller, but then we need to make the info here be smaller. I'm just going to make a width of 3 and a height of 3. Perfect. Then what I want to do is I want to come to our TD, our second one. And the most important part here, it's similar to this one, but we're going to center the items and we want to put the white space to be no wrap. So we don't want to break this thing. Then for each of the spans here, the first one we're going to make it be an accent color but with a medium value. This one we're going to do the exact same thing with the exception that we don't want it to have a medium boldness, and we want this to be muted. And then the last one, actually we're not going to do anything, so it's green, gray, white. Then on this TD over here, the second to last TD, pretty much the same thing, but no, we don't need to white space no wrap. In fact, I'll even do the same thing with the last one. And then we want to change the color of the span showing the rest time to be a little bit gray. Now, this last one over here for the RPE, we want to actually add a very specific class name, not on this, but on the item inside of it. In fact, let's wrap this around with a span, and then I'll just insert this over here. Perfect. Then what I want to do is I want to basically set some styles that are going to depend on the RPE value. So for example, in the span, we're going to set a class name that is going to be dynamic. So class name, and we're going to make it dynamic by using backticks. Then we're going to insert the following default styles. This is just going to make them have a little bit more of a stronger color. And because we're going to change the color behind them, depending on the RPE, we set a specific height and width to it. So what do we want to change the color depending on? So the exercise.rpe, if that value is greater than or equal to 8, then I want to set the color to be actually like a reddish color. So red 500, but that's too much red. So I'm going to actually put 10% opacity, and I'll make the text be red 400. If the RPE is actually greater than 7, so if the exercise.rpe is greater than or equal to 7, I'm gonna make the background be a background yellow 500 with 10% opacity, and the text is gonna be yellow 400. Now finally, in the else case of all of that, I'm gonna make the background be green. So it's red, yellow, and green. I know it's a bit confusing, but let me save this and you'll understand. So here it is. I'll actually do this so you guys can see better. There might be an easier way to organize this, but the idea here is if it's below 7, it's green. If it's between 7 and 8, it's 7, then it's 8. So that's the effort you need to put for each exercise. And it focuses obviously on putting more effort on the first few ones because they are more of compound movements. So that's what I wanted to do with them. And now we're almost done. The main thing that I want to do now is we kind of have all of our information here, as you can see, but there's obviously no space in between them. Now, to have the space, we're going to go to where we show the day cards, which is over here. And we're just going to add a class name here with a space y of 6. And now we have this beautiful UI where we can see the entire plan being displayed in our screen. So this is great. Basically, our entire app is almost working. There's only a couple more things we might want to do. So what else could we do? Well, we want to see the progression, right? So in our profile over here, we want to see the progression of our plan. So below the plan display, I want to add a card that will be similar to the other cards, exactly the same style. And it will just show a text with the progression strategy. This is actually going to be super simple, so I'll just copy and paste it here. And this is how it's going to look like. It's going to just say to continue progressing at this amount of weight every single week and so on, and it will actually abide to that. Now, this means that also we need to add a strategy for the bottom section here of the plan display. So I'm going to add a margin bottom here of 8, and we can add a space for this. And yeah, that's pretty much it for this screen. Now, we want to add the functionality to regenerate a plan when you click on this, but that's actually super simple. Now, to regenerate a plan, all you have to do is just use the same functionality we have for the generate plan. Because the way we made the function, it actually works the exact same way. So in the button over here, we can add an on click and we can just call the regenerate, but we need to make this a sync, and then we need to make this a wait, and then call the generate plan. And then we just need to use the user.id. That's all we need. Now, obviously, if there is no user, it should have been handling here. But what I can do is if there's no user and it's not loading. Okay, I'll just put here a default to say like empty string, and then it will handle in the backend. Expected 0 arguments. Oh, we don't even need to put this. Okay, that was the error. Okay, so this should be able to regenerate a plan. I can click on it. The problem is that there's no loading state here. So this is the moment where we're pretty much done with the website, the main functionality, and what I wanted to teach you guys for this video. Now, this will eventually regenerate a plan. I can check here to see if it's regenerating, if it's already version 2. No, it isn't. Let me check the network tab. Seems to be regenerating, but it just takes a bit. But the idea here is I want you guys to add any extra function. Okay, here it is. So you see version 2. I want you guys to add new functionalities to this. So what do I mean? I mean, for example, add a loading state to this. Also fetch the profile information, which is something that we left here perfect for you to be able to build your own endpoint and be able to set this up. I did this because I want you guys to practice as well. I don't want you guys to just copy what I'm writing. Now, the only thing left that I want to do is there are some account stuff that we can do easily with Neon Auth. So what I'm talking about is we automatically got this component, right, where we can access the settings page and we can see our information, and we can also get here the sign out functionality, right? So what happens is that Neon Auth actually gives us so many other functionalities that we can use. So we created a couple pages here. We created the account page and we created the, I think the account is the only one that is left, but I'll show you guys how to set up the account page, and it's not actually going to take any time. So because of Neon Auth, what we can do is we can get here using the use params hook, something that we did. Actually, I might even just copy directly what we did here. Copy this, paste it here, and then we're going to import the use params hook from React Router DOM. But then this, we're not importing the auth view. What we're importing is going to be the account view. And then because we're rendering this component, if I go to these settings here, I'll be able to see. Now, obviously the style here isn't what we want. What we want to style here with is we want to set the following. So this is what we want. We want a minimum height of the screen, a padding top of 24, and a padding bottom of 12. Also, the max width being medium makes it look very cluttered. So we're actually going to make this be a huge max width. We're going to make this be 4XL. So it definitely has some space. And the margin X is going to be auto so that we center it. So you see we have access to the entire thing. We can even see information about the session, be able to change the password, get the account, and all of this without ever needing to build any single piece of UI. All done by Neon Auth using PedroTech. So this is great. This is all components that we can use. And we're pretty much done with this. Now, the last thing I want to do is just the landing page, right? The home screen. But I don't want to build the home screen. I mentioned this. I do this in every project, which is the landing page is just a landing page, right? This is not a UI tutorial. You clearly saw that when I was building this video because I don't want to spend a lot of time building UI, but I already built it. So I'm going to just copy and paste it here for you guys. And if you want to use the same landing page as I did, feel free to just copy the code. Now this is the code, and something might be broken. Let me see what it is. So let me open here. Oh, because I wrote the code with, forgot to export default, maybe. Probably. Let me import this. Yeah, so this is the landing page. Looks really cool, right? Yeah, so I made this entire landing page with AI, of course. It looks very AI generated, but I try to make it as nice as it can, and I made it responsive as well. So if you want to use this landing page, I feel like it's a good one. We're able to click sign in here, go to the sign in page, click on sign up, go to the sign up page, create our own plans, and much more. So that's basically it. I really appreciate you guys watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like down below and comment what you want to see next. Subscribe because I'm posting twice a month and I would massively appreciate it. Also, thank you so much, Neon, for sponsoring this video. This is like the 7th time I've used Neon on a video, and it's for the reason, and it's because I really like the product. As you can see, it's super easy for us to create and spin up a scalable database that we can use for our projects. And now that they have Neon Auth, it's even better. So highly recommend you guys checking them out. Click the link in the description. You saw it's completely free. And yeah, that's basically it. So thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you guys next time.